Back when I was in college for my junior year, I was getting an apartment. I needed a roommate but did not know who to live with. All my friends already had living situations figured out. I was unable to live with any of them, which disappointed me. But a big part of it was that I could not afford it. I found an apartment in a good location sort of late. I contacted a few friends that I would want to live with, but none of them were able to live with me. They already had plans of where they were going to live. So I posted a Snapchat story telling how I needed a roommate. The college I went to was very large, and over my 2 years there to that point, I had made many friends. I probably had 100 to 200 people from college on my Snapchat as friends, so I was hoping that something would work out. One girl responded to it though. Her name was Claire and I barely knew her. She was not in any of my groups of friends at all. I had one class with her during my freshman year and did a group project that she was in. That's how I got her Snapchat. I literally hadn't seen her or talked to her since the project. But she said that she too needed a place to live and said that she would be willing to get an apartment with me. I had no other people offering, so I ended up saying yes and we agreed to become roommates. The apartment we moved into was just off campus and it was pretty nice. It had 2 bedrooms, so we each had our own room. Things started out normal. We were not best friends, but we were friendly with each other and I liked living there. Our bedrooms were next to each other down the hallway and off the living room and kitchen. Every night when I would go to bed, I would close my bedroom door. I remember that one morning I woke up and the door was wide open. This was strange because I was sure that I had closed it the previous night. However, I didn't know 100% for sure, so I didn't say anything about it. But probably a couple of nights later, it was wide open again. I knew for a fact that time that I had closed it before, so I was really confused. To me, the only explanation was that Claire had opened the door, because she was the only person living there. Still, I didn't say anything to her. The next night, I decided to lock my bedroom door when I went to sleep. Our doors did have locks on them, but I hadn't felt the need to lock the door because I didn't think Claire would be opening it or anything. After locking the door, the crazy thing is that night I woke up to the sound of the doorknob rattling. Somebody was trying to get in. I figured Claire. I groggily woke up more and the rattling stopped. I thought about calling out and asking who was there, but I did not and the noises stopped. So then I just went back to sleep. In the morning when I got up, I brought it up to Claire. She acted surprised about it and asked if someone had broken in or something. I said that I didn't think so because nothing was stolen and the door was still locked. Plus, all the windows were fine. I asked Claire if it was her and she said no. I also asked if she ever sleepwalked, thinking that it would be a logical explanation, but she said no, she never did. This was really suspicious to me, but I just said whatever and then moved on. Claire didn't seem too concerned about it, which was concerning to me. I couldn't think of why she would do these things though. It was my thought that maybe she was sleepwalking and just didn't know it. A couple of nights later, I once again woke up to the sound of someone trying to open my bedroom door. Now, as soon as I heard it, I was wide awake this time and not sleepy like before. My floor was carpet and I instantly got up and quietly went over to the door. I couldn't hardly see anything because all the lights in the entire apartment were off, but my TV was on the home screen which provided a tiny bit of light. I quickly walked over to the door and opened it. When I did, it was even darker out there, so I barely saw anything. But I did see someone quickly turning away and running off. This person did resemble Claire, but they were wearing all black, including a ski mask. Plus, it was so dark that I couldn't say 100% that it was her. But I didn't have any time to say anything at all. She ran away and then opened the front door to the apartment and left entirely. I was so confused and also creeped out. I went over to the door and opened it and looked out, but I saw nothing as whoever was there had already ran far away. Then I went over to Claire's room and knocked on the door. It was closed and I tried to open it, but the door was locked. I banged on it and got no answer, so I called the police. Either my roommate was playing the worst prank ever on me or somebody had broken into our apartment. The cops got there a while later and looked around both inside and outside the apartment. They knocked on Claire's door a bunch, but she never answered and I assumed she was gone. They said they were not going to break the door down or force her to answer if she was there, because apparently they had no authority to do that in that particular situation or something. So the cops left and I also texted and called Claire a bunch as it appeared as though her phone was turned off. I stayed up for the rest of the night as I could not sleep. Claire never showed up either from her bedroom or elsewhere. Eventually I had to go to class. I got a text after my first class of the day. It was from Claire, and she said she was sorry she didn't respond right away, but she had to go in early to her work-study job. I wasn't buying that, but I didn't accuse her. Instead, I told my parents about what happened. They helped me out, and I was able to get out of the lease on the apartment and find another place to live alone. I haven't spoken to Claire since I moved out. I know that it was her doing those things, but I can't prove it, and I don't know why she would do that. This happened a couple of years ago. I used to live in an apartment that was decently nice, and I rented it with my roommate who I will call JT. Well, unfortunately, JT got a better job that required him to move away. JT and I were not good friends, but we were cool with each other. When he moved, I understood why, obviously, but I also could not afford the place on my own, so we had to get out of the lease. JT did pay the cancellation fee, but I had a short notice of like 1 month to find a new place to live. So I ended up going online and pretty much finding a random roommate. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. With my job and the city that I was living in at the time, it was either get a roommate or live in a complete dump. And I lived in a really crappy place in the past and did not want to do it again. So I was able to find a roommate. It seemed a little sketchy to find a random person online to live with, but I figured it should be fine. The roommate I found was a guy named Leonard. For the most part, he seemed normal. He didn't really seem like a guy that I would be good friends with, but that didn't matter. All I cared about was that he paid rent, was not a jerk, and did not wreck the place. The place that we found to live was a townhome, and it was older, but not too bad. The space that Leonard and I had was a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms, one for each of us. After moving in, things seemed to otherwise go pretty well. I would be at work a lot, and so would Leonard. Most of the time, we would hang out in our rooms. But I noticed that Leonard would be gone quite a bit, and he would be gone at all hours of the day and night. I didn't really ask him about it and didn't really care that much, but it did seem a little bit odd. For example, I would sometimes hear him leaving at 11 p.m. or midnight, sometimes later, and he would be gone for a long time, but he would normally be back the following morning. Other times he would leave and I wouldn't see him for days. He never left an explanation though, which was weird because we did talk on a fairly regular basis. And when he went to visit family out of town once, he did tell me about that. Also, his job was not one where he would work crazy hours. They were pretty normal. One time was really weird though. I was at home one night and Leonard got back after me. I happened to be in the kitchen when he arrived home and we said hi to each other. Then he went into his room and shut the door. I went back to my room, but only like 20 minutes later, I remembered that I wanted to ask Leonard a question about the Wi-Fi. So I walked over to his room and knocked on the door, but there was no answer. This was strange because he had just gone into his room and I hadn't heard him leave. I knocked again. I guess he could have been sleeping or something, but for some reason I just opened the door. When I did, he was not in the room. It was completely empty. I closed the door and then wondered where he had gone. He was not in the bathroom or any other room. I just went back to my room feeling like I had gone crazy. Then, like 10 minutes after that, there was a knock on my bedroom door. I answered it to see Leonard there, and he said that he had heard me knocking on his door earlier, but he had fallen asleep. I played it off and said that was fine and I didn't mean to wake him up, and then I asked him about the Wi-Fi like I wanted to before. After that, he went back to his room. But I knew that he had not been sleeping because I had looked in his room and he wasn't there. Where had he come from? I was very confused by the whole thing. Things seemed kind of strange for the next couple of weeks. Leonard was gone all the time at odd hours and stuff. I just tried to ignore it. One time though, he was gone for like 2 days in a row. One of those days, I got curious. His door was closed, but I opened it. When I saw it in his room, it looked pretty normal. I walked inside and looked around. I think I was just curious and I guess a bit nosy. I noticed something. At the closet in the corner of his room was sort of a ladder. I walked over to it and saw that there was a trap door in the ceiling. I hadn't even noticed it, but I guess it led to the attic. I didn't have access to that in my room. By this point, I was just curious as to what was in the attic, not even trying to pry into Leonard's stuff. So I walked up the steps and opened the attic door. When I looked up there, it was completely dark. I took out my phone and used a flashlight. There wasn't much space up there, but there were a ton of duffel bags. In the corner, I saw a huge stack of cash as well. I left the attic quickly and went back down and then ran back to my room. I didn't see or hear from Leonard for several more days after that. Then there was a knock on the door one night, and it was the cops. It turns out Leonard was a drug dealer. He got caught, and the cops came in and took all his stuff. I ended up moving out of that place shortly after. That was definitely a crazy situation. When I was younger, I had a few roommates. All of my college years except for one, I had roommates, and then the first few years out of college as well. At one point, I lived in a house with another woman who was around my age. Her name was Allison, and I actually worked with her, and that's how we met. We were coworkers and sort of became friends. However, she ended up changing jobs. Now, the two of us were never that close, and never best friends or anything. I always thought that she seemed a little odd, and I'm not just saying that. We remained in touch a little on social media and text, and she lived in the same city as me. So when I needed a new place, she happened to be looking as well, and we decided to get a place together. Allison told me that there was a place that she was interested in, and she would send me all the details. When she did, I got the information, and I thought that it was a good situation. The place was pretty expensive, and it looked okay, but I could afford it, so I agreed. It was a house, and it was small, but it had 2 floors and a basement, and the neighborhood was decent. We each had a bedroom upstairs, and the rent was $1,200 a month each. I had not lived in the area long at all, so I didn't know much about the other prices because I hadn't looked yet. So we moved in, and we each had a bedroom upstairs. Allison really organized everything, and she even met with the landlord when I was at work to get the keys and stuff. I got the Wi-Fi and she would pay me for it, but then she would pay for the rent and I would pay her for it. Living there, things went pretty well. Alice and I got along good, and we both took care of the house and were gone a lot for our jobs. I remember that after living there for like 6 months, our landlord came over for an inspection. I'm not sure why, but he had to come into the place to look around and stuff. When he came over, Allison was gone, but I was home. The landlord entered the house and said hi and asked how living there was going and stuff. I told him that it was going well, and we chit-chatted for a bit. Then he started looking around and asking if things were working well, like the sinks and heat and AC. All that kind of stuff. Everything was good. Then when he got upstairs to our rooms, he noticed how Allison's room was kind of a lot larger than mine. I had known that her room was bigger, but I had never been in Allison's room, as she would always have the door closed when she was in there, as well as when she was away, and I never thought to go in or anything. When the landlord brought up how her room was a lot larger, he asked if I paid less in rent. I said no, we both pay $1,200. He then corrected me and said, "You mean $600." I was confused until he told me that the total rent for the house was $1,200 a month. It was then that I realized that Allison was scamming me. I told him how she said it was $1,200 each, and that's what I had been paying her. He said that we needed to figure it out and she might be trying to steal from me, because the rent was a total of $1,200, not $1,200 each. It was supposed to be $600 each. So I was essentially paying the total rent and she was living there for free. Plus she had the larger bedroom. I was so mad. The landlord soon left. When Allison got back that day, I told her about it. At first she claimed that the landlord must have been confused or mistaken. But when I pressed her with more details, she just ran away to her bedroom and locked the door behind her. I was furious, but decided I would handle it the next day, as she clearly wasn't coming out of the room. The following morning when I got up, Allison was gone. And all her stuff was gone too. She had moved out in the middle of the night. After that, I lived there on my own. I contacted the landlord and reported it. He said Allison informed him that she was moving out, and she tried to say that it was because I was refusing to pay the rent. However, he knew what really happened. He ended up being nice to me and giving me a discount for the final few months I lived there by myself, and he charged a fee to Allison for breaking the lease, I think. Either way, I never saw her again. I suppose I could have sued her or something, but I never thought to do that. I blocked her on everything, and I still can't believe how she scammed me. This happened years ago when I was younger. So I was looking for a new place to live and did not have a ton of money. I knew that I needed a roommate in order to get a decent place. However, I was moving to a new city for work and did not know anybody. The plan was to have a roommate for maybe a year until I could afford a place on my own. Not knowing how else to get a roommate, I turned to the internet and Craigslist. I posted an ad with the town I was looking to live in, saying that I was looking for a roommate. I made it clear in the ad that I was a female and I wanted to live with another female and preferably around my age. So the first person to respond to my ad was this guy. He said that he wanted to be my roommate and get a place with me. When he told me his name, it was Michael, which I asked to confirm that he was a man, and he said yes. I told him I was only looking to live with another woman, so I would not be interested, but he continued to text me. He tried to say that it wasn't a big deal and he wouldn't bother me and stuff. I told him no again and then started to ignore him. However, this guy continued to text me. He was asking why I was ignoring him and saying that he really needed a place to live and stuff like that. I could not believe how much he was texting. It was like 3 times a day for the next few days. I was still just ignoring him and thinking that eventually he would give it up. Within a week, I was able to find an actual roommate, another woman around my age. We ended up meeting and getting the apartment that I mentioned in the ad where I was looking to live. Meanwhile, Michael was still texting me, so I blocked his number. I thought that was the end of it, and I didn't hear anything for a while. But one day, literally like a week after moving in, I was at home at the apartment by myself. It was sometime in the afternoon, and my roommate was still gone at work. There was a knock at the door, and I went over and looked out of the peephole. Some guy was standing there who I didn't know. I thought it was a neighbor or something, and I opened the door and answered it. When I did, the guy said that he was Michael, and he asked if I still needed a roommate. I said no, and then quickly slammed the door shut and locked it. Michael tried opening the door, and he kept knocking on it. He kept asking me to open the door. I just ignored it. I didn't say anything. Eventually, he left after probably like 20 minutes. After that, I told myself that if he ever showed up again, I was calling the cops. But thankfully, he never did. I never saw him or heard from him. I'm not quite sure how he found me, though. My best guess is that he found me on social media, as he knew my first name, the city I lived in, as well as the apartment I wanted to get. But really, I don't know. It was very weird. When I was in college as a freshman, I lived in the dorms and I got assigned a random roommate by the university. The dorm rooms were pretty small, but standard for most places. There was just a bed, desk, and a shelf on each side of the room. So we each had our own side. My roommate was a guy named Sam, and when we first met, I thought that he was cool. He seemed nice for the most part, and we talked a bit. I thought that things were going to work out good and we would become friends. For the first couple of weeks, things were going well. Sam and I would sometimes hang out, and we would talk quite a bit. Eventually, strange things started happening around the dorms. One time, I was in the bathroom taking a shower. Our dorm had a bathroom in the hallway that basically had like 8 doors in it, each leading to a small private bathroom. In the middle, outside all those doors, was just an open area with some sinks. Normally, there would always be a few doors open. I don't think I ever saw all the doors closed. So, as I was taking a shower on this day, out of nowhere someone started trying to open the door to the one that I was in over and over. I was confused because I was sure that there were other bathrooms available. I yelled saying that I was in there, but they kept trying to open the door. Then it stopped and they went away. Maybe a few days after that, I was in my dorm room doing homework. It was sometime in the afternoon and Sam was gone, so I was by myself. Out of nowhere, someone started banging super loud on the door. It was like they were banging on it as hard as they could. I got up to see who was there, but they ran away and were gone by the time I looked out, so I couldn't tell who had done it. The same thing happened again the next day. I was in the room and there were some loud bangs on the door, and when I got up to look, they were gone. Then I remembered that I went down to the study room in the dorm building to do some work late at night. I didn't want to bother Sam because it was like midnight and I still had work to do, so I was by myself in the study room that we had. I remember that as I was in there, suddenly all the lights shut off and it was completely dark. I looked around but could not see anything at all. I thought that maybe the power had gone out, but I didn't know why because it wasn't storming or anything. After making my way over to the light switch, I turned it back on and realized that the power was not out. Somebody had turned off the lights on me. The door to the room was open and my back was facing it, so it would be easy for somebody to do so without me noticing. Someone was messing with me, it seemed, and it was really creeping me out. I went back to the room and went to bed at that point. The next day, I told Sam all the crazy things that were happening, and he was like, "Wow, that's crazy." The odd occurrences didn't stop, though. There were more random knocks on the door, both in the dorm room when I was alone and when I was in the bathroom. One time, I came back to the dorm to see that somebody put a bunch of peanut butter on the doorknob, completely covering it. It was gross. I was seriously considering moving dorms. But the final straw was when we got black mold in our dorm room. I had a mini fridge in the dorm that I brought, and it was actually under my bed because my bed was sort of high above the ground. There was a blanket that I wasn't using, and I was unaware that it somehow got on top of the fridge and was draped along the back of the fridge as well. With the condensation and how close the fridge backed up to the wall, the blanket created a bunch of mold that was on the wall and the blanket as well. It was disgusting. So when that happened, I reported it and Sam and I had to move. Except I requested to move to a different dorm because of all the strange things. Thankfully, my request was granted. I moved away from Sam and got a new roommate. Well, not long after this happened, I heard from a mutual friend at school something interesting. He said that Sam told him he was the one messing with me, and he did all that because he wanted me to move out. Sam was laughing about it as if he was proud. He had knocked on the door all those times, and he had turned off the lights on me, and it was even he who deliberately put the blanket on the fridge to cause the mold. All that because he apparently hated living with me that much, and didn't want to just simply tell me that he wanted to move out or request a new room. But I don't think it was just that he didn't like me. I think he liked messing with me and it was fun for him. I think he's a total psychopath. I texted him about it and he denied it. But I told him that he's lucky I don't report him to the dean, and as long as I never saw him again, I would not report it. For the rest of my college career, I never did see him again. Many years ago, I had just started my freshman year of college. I was going to a college out of my home state, and I knew no one that was going to the same school as me, which meant I was going to be rooming with a total stranger. When I met my roommate, she seemed nice enough, and her parents seemed nice enough as well. Everything was going fine for the first couple of weeks, but then some odd habits began emerging. I noticed that every time I would sit at my desk, she would move from wherever she was to sit on the floor behind me. Every single time. The first few times I thought it was just coincidental, because it happened when she would just be entering the room from her last classes. I thought that maybe she just wanted to relax by sitting on the floor. Then the other scenarios began happening. She had a beanbag sitting right by my desk, so close that it was touching it, and it was her favorite spot. She always sat there to do homework and whatnot. If I decided I wanted to sit at my desk, she would move from the beanbag to the floor behind me. Sometimes she would even abandon her homework to sit behind me. I didn't sit at my desk too often for that reason. My roommate had a job that started at 8 a.m. every weekday, which means I typically got woken up early, which was fine. I usually just rolled over and tried to get some extra sleep. A few times, though, I had woken up to her staring at me. One time, she was a foot away from my bed, just staring. She also made a point to look at me when she left, but it didn't end there. Other people's hair generally disgusts me. I don't like touching it or seeing it on my things. My roommate had long curly red hair. One day I decided to wash my sheets. I don't even sleep under the sheets. I'll either sleep with only a throw blanket or only my comforter. So I never go under my sheets, but I lay on top of them, so they still deserve to be washed. When I pulled back the sheet, I was met with strings of my roommate's long curly red hair. I have no clue how it got there, and I'm not sure if I want to know. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, my roommate and I shared the same class together. When class ended, she would sit there and wait for me to pack up my notebooks and things, and then we would walk back to our dorm room together. That by itself is normal, but here's the strange part. She never tried to talk to me. She would just walk like 2 feet behind me. By itself, it seemed kind of normal, but with everything else, it just sort of felt like she was watching me. She never did any physical harm towards me, but the whole semester was a little unnerving to me. I ended up getting a new roommate for the next semester. I wasn't allowed to switch rooms mid-semester, but I was able to get a new roommate for the following one. The rest of that school year, though, I still caught my first roommate staring at me in the cafeteria and student lounges, and she would sit eerily close to me and my friends. Thankfully, I never had to see her again, because I ended up transferring to a different college after that year to be closer to home. We lived in the main floor suite of an old 4-story house. One day, the guy who lived in the basement suite underneath us started a fire which burnt a total of 7 tenants out of our homes. We escaped barefoot in our pajamas with our cat in her carrier. We got put up in a motel for 3 days and had meals provided. The motel we stayed at was a series of cute little white bungalows rather than a single building with rooms. Like a lot of motels, it serves as low-income accommodation to longer-term tenants, as well as crisis accommodation for refugees and people displaced by house fires. Upon arrival, we found that our suite had a kitchen, bath, and main room with a queen bed and television. We were a little surprised to discover that there was a room at the end of a long hallway towards the back of the suite. It was another queen bed with 2 side tables and a lamp on one of them. It also had a closet. Upon discovering the room, I opened the door, looked around, and felt a strong urge to not be in there and wanted to shut the door again. First, I had to cross the room to turn off the bedside lamp. I guess the motel staff had left it on for us. We agreed that we would be sleeping in the front room and would not need to go into that back room again. We arrived at the motel in the morning, only a few hours after the fire. Our traumatized cat remained curled up in her carrier next to the bed the whole day, not leaving to eat, drink, or visit her little box. We had opened all the windows in the suite to air it out, except the one in the room that we would not be using. Later, when we went around to shut all the windows, I knew we hadn't opened the one in the back room to begin with, but I decided to check it anyways as it was a ground level window and I wanted to be sure that it was locked before we went to bed. Checking the window did require crossing the entire room again, as the window was adjacent to the table with the lamp. Once the window was secured, I turned to leave and noticed the lamp on the bedside table was on. I think I would have noticed if my husband had gone into the room for any reason, but maybe not, so I just turned it off and left. I asked my husband if he had turned on the lamp. He said no. I became nervous and pressed him, so he changed the no to an I'm not sure. We were scheduled to stay at the motel for 3 nights. Fortunately, we had some friends who were on vacation, and they said that we could stay in their place while they were gone, but it would be a couple of days before they left, so we had to wait it out at the motel. The walls were thin, and our little bungalow was a 4-plex. We could hear the muffled voice of the neighbor on the other side of the wall. We also heard the outside voices of people mingling on the lawns. I laid awake all night. At some point, probably in the very early hours of the morning, I heard a male voice over my right shoulder say, "Hey." I was startled as I thought someone had come in. By this time, I knew what voices carried from next door and outside sounded like. I also know what my husband sounds like when he mutters in his sleep. This voice wasn't any of that. Anyhow, that was it for our first day. Nothing but a creepy room, a suspicious table lamp, and a dude saying hey in the night. On the second day, our cat left her carrier and patrolled the perimeter of the rooms, never venturing farther than halfway down the hallway. I don't blame her. If the bathroom door hadn't been halfway down the hall, neither of us would have ventured even that far. The weird feeling from that room started several feet before the door to the room. That night, our cat grew bolder and started exploring more space than just the perimeters. As we laid in bed trying to sleep on the second night, our cat was at the end of the hallway outside the creepy room making a fuss. She laid on her side with her nose pressed against the gap under the door, meowing constantly. She was reaching her paws under the gap and clawing at the bottom of the door. She did this for hours. It is a behavior that we've seen before when she's locked out of a room that we're all inside. We've learned not to close doors, even when we're using the restroom, because she hates being left out. A couple of times I ventured down the hallway to pick her up and bring her in for a snuggle, but she always went back. She has never behaved that way outside of a vacant room. The next day, we got the keys to our friend's place, and we didn't stay for our third night at the motel. I'm very glad our stay ended early, because I'm fairly certain that we had a roommate in there with us to stay. I wasn't looking forward to what would have happened on the third night, specifically regarding that strange room. This happened a few years ago. I was going through a difficult time, so I was looking for a new place to live without big commitments until I figured life out. I met this guy through a Craigslist posting. He said he had an apartment and was looking for a roommate. I got his name and number and called him. We set up a meeting at a public place for a meet and greet. Everything went seemingly fine and he agreed to show me the place. He seemed super nice and helpful and was easy to get along with. He was neat and his place seemed low maintenance. It didn't bother me that he was a guy. We agreed on no drugs, no parties, and no craziness terms. We agreed on monthly payments and I moved in a few weeks later. So it was 2 weeks after I started living there when one day he came in early from work and had this very upset voice and claimed that we needed to talk. He said that I had been acting inappropriately by having my boyfriend stop by on occasion. The thing was that my boyfriend would not even stay to spend the night or anything like that. He would just drop by if he was in the area to see me for like 10 minutes and say hi every now and then. I began questioning my new roommate why it made him uncomfortable, and he just said that it made him feel uncomfortable because everybody at the apartment complex thought that I was his romantic partner. I was so furious and couldn't believe that that was his reason. It then escalated to a point where he said that the entire time he had known me, which was for like 2 weeks of very minimal interaction, he was convinced that I was possessed. He said that he could see it in my eyes. I knew at that point that I wasn't going to live there long term, and I began looking for a new place immediately to move into. I told him this, and he acted all calmly then, saying that I could take my time looking for a new place. I luckily found an apartment that I could move into and had planned to do it the very next day. I told my insane roommate that I was leaving tomorrow. The day of the move-out came, and I walked into the apartment to get my stuff. I walked into my room, and there were these creepy candles all lit. I picked up all my belongings and left. He sent a message to me later with, of course, something that had to do with he was hoping that I would face my sins and darkness. I have no idea what he meant. I blocked that guy's number after that, so who knows if he kept sending me the stuff. I didn't care to find out. I do trust people a lot less, and have never had a random roommate again, and thankfully never had another roommate again either, period. I was lucky enough to live in a large house when I was a kid. My house had a side room towards the back of the first floor. My siblings called it the second living room because that's basically what it was. It had an old recliner, a small table, and a mid-sized couch. That was it. We hardly ever sat in there. One morning, I woke up sick. I told my mom, and she told me to take the day off from school and to stay home. My siblings had to be at school, and my parents worked, so that meant that I had the house to myself. I laid around in bed for a few hours until around 10:30 a.m., when I heard steady walking coming from my first floor. I thought nothing of it at first, and I just assumed that maybe my mom went in late like she did sometimes. I needed something to eat anyways, so I stood up and went downstairs to the kitchen. I made it about 3 feet from the front of my kitchen's walk-in doorway when I locked my eyes with not my mom, but a 6-foot-tall man wearing raggy and ripped-up old clothes. I was frozen in fear. I just stood there. It was only for a few seconds, but it felt like hours had passed. The guy just stood there and watched me too, no expression or anything. I eventually pulled myself out of the shock and bolted to my bedroom upstairs. I didn't hear him follow me, but I got into my bedroom and locked the door and moved my dresser in front of it anyways. I pulled out my phone, and instead of calling 911 like I should have, I called my mom. I screamed into the phone, telling her that somebody was in the house trying to kill me. She told me not to leave my room for any reason and to call the police, so I did. 15 minutes later, the police finally showed up, as I could see through my bedroom window. I watched them enter the house before I left my room to run down to them for safety. I told them everything that happened. They did a quick search of the home and found nothing. Not a single person or a broken window or door. My parents both came home shortly after, and we were absolutely furious that the guy was not caught. I was extremely angry as well, but also relieved that I was alive. The police began packing their things, but as one of the last officers was on the way out, he noticed a Walmart bag sticking out from under our couch. It was that couch in the side room. We found hundreds of trash bags and week-old rotting food under the couch, along with some other personal items like wipes, water bottles, and even a bag of urine. Whoever that man was in the kitchen, he had been living under our couch for weeks. I can't comprehend how none of my family members smelled the garbage that was piled up under the couch the entire time. The fact that he never made a single noise under there also baffles me. We've since cleaned that room out completely and turned it into an extra dining room area, so there's nowhere for unwanted roommates to hide anymore. When I was a freshman in college, I lived in the dorms and I got a random roommate. I thought that it would work out fine, because I get along well with most people and make friends pretty easily. I figured that my roommate would probably get along with me as well, even if we didn't like the same things. Obviously, I hoped that he would have similar interests, and maybe we could become good friends. because I didn't really know anybody else at the university that I was going to at the time. Well, when I moved into the dorms, my roommate was not there. His name was Ryan, and his stuff was there, but I wasn't quite sure where he was. After my parents had helped me finish moving in all my stuff and left, Ryan was still nowhere in sight. In fact, he did not show up until the next day. It was when I got back from my first class and had a little bit of time left before my next one. When I entered the room, Ryan was just there, sitting at his desk and apparently doing homework. Ryan was about average height and weight, had glasses, and short blondish colored hair. Right away, he did not seem very friendly. When I entered the room, he turned and looked at me, but did not say hi or anything. Just as fast as he looked at me, he turned his head back to his desk. I said hi and walked over to him and stuck my hand out for a handshake. I remember he sort of hesitated, but did shake my hand. I had a brief conversation with him, asking him about himself. He was not a freshman like me, but a sophomore at the school, and he was from a small town several hours away. That was really all that I gathered. Soon, I went to my next class. After that, things only got more and more strange. Ryan was not often in his room, but when he was, I would sometimes try talking to him. He would usually give me very short answers and never ask me anything about myself. I thought maybe he was just shy or uncomfortable around other people, but at one point, he told me in a very stern way to stop talking to him and to not talk to him anymore. It was pretty rude, and I no longer felt like he was just a shy kid, but a kind of rude one. Still, I didn't want it to be a terrible semester, so I chose not to argue or anything. I decided to just let him be on his side of the room, and I would do my thing on my side. As the weeks went on, Ryan would be gone for sometimes days at a time. I would wake up and he would just be gone. Then when it would be nighttime, he still wouldn't be there, and I wouldn't see him for several days. Then, typically, he'd just walk into the room like nothing happened, or I'd come back and he'd already be there. I never bothered to ask him where he was though, knowing that he didn't want me talking to him. I remember at one point, on one of the days that he was at the dorm, he left sometime in the evening. Hours later, at probably like 11 o'clock at night or so, I remember I heard talking in the hallway. It got louder, and I realized that two guys were arguing. I recognized Ryan's voice to be one of them. He loudly told the guy to shut up, and a few seconds later, he walked into the room. I found out the next day that it was another guy who lived on our floor who he yelled at. Apparently, all the guy said to him was, "Hey, how's it going?" when they passed each other in the hallway. Ryan snapped at him immediately, telling him not to talk to him, which made the other guy angry. They argued briefly before Ryan walked away. I found this out because the other guy came up to me and told me that my roommate was really strange. That's when we had the conversation, and I was kind of creeped out by Ryan's erratic behavior. As the next few weeks went on, I was hoping to be able to get a new roommate when the next semester rolled around. In the meantime, I just ignored Ryan and he did the same to me. It really wasn't that bad because he was typically gone, so it was mostly like I had my own dorm to myself. You just never knew when Ryan would be back or how long he would be there. So one day, I remember that I got up and went to class. Ryan had been gone for the whole night and was still gone when I got up and left. I was away for several hours attending my classes. When I returned to the dorm room, I went inside to see everything on my side of the room just gone. It was the craziest thing that I'd ever seen. The bed, desk, and chair that came with the room were still there, but literally everything that I had was gone. My books, my blankets and pillows, clothes, snacks, and everything was nowhere in sight. Ryan's side of the room looked exactly the same, and Ryan was not there. I went inside the room and looked around, trying to figure out what happened. I was sure that I locked the door when I left, and I immediately suspected Ryan. I started to look on his side of the room. He really didn't have that much stuff to begin with. He really just had some clothes, a few blankets, and some notebooks. There was no place that he could have put all my things. After realizing that my stuff was definitely not in the room, I walked out into the hallway. I went to the resident assistant and told him what happened. We did a small investigation looking around the building, and soon we got in touch with campus security. Unfortunately, the dorm building was really old and did not have any security cameras inside of it. Luckily, I had made a few friends by that point in the school year. One had a dorm room all to himself, so I stayed in his spare bed for the next couple of nights. An investigation was done, and Ryan was nowhere to be seen. Several days later, though, my things were found. They were located a little ways into a woods just off campus. He had tossed all my stuff there. Ryan, meanwhile, did not show up for the entire rest of the semester. I was given a new dorm room all to myself by the school, and they also gave me a gift card to buy some new stuff, so that was nice. But as far as I'm aware, Ryan never showed up to campus again. I have no idea where he went. He was a very strange guy, but I'm glad that I didn't have to live with him any longer. Every year on Christmas Day, we usually host family over at our house. We have a decent-sized place, and most of the family lives nearby. I live here with my wife, and a few years ago we were hosting Christmas like usual. So family members started coming over at around 12 o'clock, and they were mostly parking on the side of the street out front. Our neighborhood is pretty quiet, but not super isolated or anything. When pretty much everyone had gotten there, I remember that somebody told me that there was a random car in the driveway. I walked over to a front window, and I saw this large SUV with really tinted windows just sitting in the driveway. Apparently, it had just recently got there, but hadn't left. Nobody had gotten out of it either. I looked at it and wondered who was driving, because I had never seen the car before. Nobody was getting out, and it wasn't leaving, so I decided to go out and ask. I thought that maybe it was somebody who was lost trying to get to a neighbor's house. That was the most logical explanation in my mind. So I opened up the front door and I walked outside. However, as soon as I stepped out into the front yard, the car, which was already running, started suddenly backing up. I was not able to reach it, and the car quickly left the driveway and then drove off down the street pretty quickly. It seemed weird, but at least they were gone now. After that, I went back inside. Over the next few hours, I talked with lots of family, and soon we had our Christmas dinner. Some of us were going to take a walk around the neighborhood after, because even though there was some snow on the ground, it was a nice day and rather warm. When I got near the front door though, I was shocked to see the same SUV parked in the driveway again. I opened the door once more to go outside. When I did, once again, whoever it was backed out and then quickly drove away. This was very strange. I remember noticing also just how tinted the windows were. It was like I couldn't see anything inside. So I had obviously no idea who was driving or anything. Well, we ended up taking a walk around the neighborhood. I didn't see the car at all, and nobody else did either. We went back in after that, and everybody hung out some more. That night, people started to leave at probably around 7 or 8. By 9 o'clock, everyone was gone, and it was just me and my wife at home. Well, we were in the living room watching a movie, and my wife got up to go get something from the kitchen. However, on her way back, she went to the front of the house and passed by a window. I heard her mention that the car was there again. I walked over to the front of the house and looked outside. Once more, that same SUV was sitting in the driveway. I really couldn't believe it. We both stood there near the front door and watched it. The car was running, but nobody got out or anything. We watched it for at least 10 minutes. It was crazy. Then I had enough and I went to leave again. This time, as soon as I opened the front door, I took off and I sprinted for the SUV. However, like every other time, the car quickly backed up and then drove away. I was unable to catch up to it. I then went back inside after that. My wife and I were both very confused. For the rest of the night though, the car didn't come back, and I haven't seen the SUV since. I'm hoping that I never see it again. I still wonder about it though. This happened years ago when I was in high school. At the time, we were having Christmas at our house. My grandparents, a few aunts and uncles, and cousins were all coming over to our house. We had our whole house all decorated, and some of our family had been in town for a few days and were staying at our house because we had 2 extra rooms. There were a handful of presents wrapped and under the tree, but a majority of the present wrapping happened on Christmas Eve. I had recently gotten my first job earlier in that year, so I was really excited about the gifts that I had gotten for everyone. Some I had put under the tree already, but there were a couple that were hidden in my room so that nobody would see them. We wrapped presents on Christmas Eve and all hung out late into Christmas Eve night, and everyone got to bed kind of late. I went up in my room and played some video games for a while because I wasn't quite sleepy yet. I ended up staying up pretty late though.
It was 2 a.m. and I was about to go to sleep when I realized that I hadn't put my last few presents under the tree. They were already wrapped, but I had them hidden in my bedroom closet. I went and retrieved them and then left my bedroom to place them under the Christmas tree. When I left my bedroom, I saw that the house was all dark and quiet, aside from a little nightlight on the wall that we had up there. I walked down the stairs and then into the living room. It was a little bit brighter there due to the lights on the Christmas tree. I added my presents to the many that were already laid out under the tree. As I turned to go back up the stairs, I heard a noise suddenly. It was so quiet that the noise startled me quite a bit. It was coming from the back of the house. I walked over to see what was going on. As I did, I thought I heard rattling from the back door leading to the patio. It seemed like somebody was going to come through the back door into the house. I entered the kitchen, which is where the back door led to, and turned on the light. As I did, I saw the door opening. I jumped back and heard a noise as if now somebody was running away outside. After I gathered myself, I realized that nobody was there and whoever had been there left. I walked over and looked outside. I didn't see anybody, so I shut the door and locked it. The door must have been left unlocked or something. Our back door was rarely used by us, so that must have been the case. Maybe one of my cousins or somebody used it and never thought to lock it up at night. Either way, I was terrified by what I had just witnessed. I went around making sure all the other doors in the house were locked. After doing so, I was confident whoever tried to get into the house was now gone, and I went back and turned off all the lights, then went upstairs to go to bed. I got into my bedroom again and turned out the lights. When I got into my bed, I happened to pull back the curtain and glance out my window. My window overlooked the side yard of our house. What I saw was a man walking from our front yard going into the back. My heart started racing. This had to be the same person that tried to break in. I ran out of my room and back downstairs. As I did, I turned on every light that I could. I got back down to the kitchen and turned the light on again, hoping this would deter the man. And it seemed to work. I heard sounds as if the man was walking away through the snow near the back door area once again. I looked out the front window and just barely saw the guy walking away down the street. Then I left the lights on and went back up to bed again. This time, I looked out my window and didn't see the man. I figured he was gone for good now, and finally I was able to fall asleep. The next morning was Christmas, and when I woke up, I could already hear family downstairs talking, and when I went downstairs, my mother asked me if I had left the lights on. I told her yes, and then explained why. A few of us went outside, and we found out that the lock on our back door had somehow been broken. It wasn't working at all, so even when it looked like the door was locked from the inside, it wasn't really locked from the outside. That's how the guy had opened up the door. What scares me is that when I went back downstairs that night, I didn't know that the guy could have just walked right in if he wanted, and I wouldn't be able to stop him. I'm grateful that turning on the lights did, and I wonder what would have happened if I didn't.
This is something that happened back when I had just recently turned 16 years old and I was in high school. I lived with my parents, my older sister who was 18 and a senior in high school, and my other older sister who was 21 and in college. So sometime in December, maybe like a week before Christmas, my older sister, the one who was 18, asked me if I wanted to go shopping with her. I had recently gotten my first job, so I had a little bit of money and I had my license, but I did not have a car yet. My sister said that we could get Christmas gifts for our parents, as well as my older sister, who was not back from college yet. I agreed and was excited to do some shopping. We had gone Christmas shopping once already, but I was not able to get anything for my parents then because they had been with us. So we went out on a Saturday and first went to this local mall. After spending some time there and getting something for our sister and my mom, we then started looking for our dad. We went to the Best Buy, I remember, which was not in the mall but a separate store. My sister and I split up in the Best Buy because I was busy looking at the video games. Best Buy was always very interesting to me when I was younger, and it still is, because of all the TVs, computers, and video games. So, as I was distracted by the video games, I remember my sister had been away from me for a while, but she came up to me and said that some creepy guy was following her around in the store. This got my attention, and I asked her about it. She motioned with her eyes to the other side of the store, and said that the guy had talked to her briefly and seemed creepy. She walked away from him, and he then kept trailing her at a distance. By now, he was like 3 aisles over and seemed to be looking at something else. This seemed kind of creepy to me as well. My sister then suggested that we leave and go somewhere else, and I agreed. So at that point, We didn't get anything and we walked for the exit of the store. When we did so, I remember noticing the man start to walk in our direction with us. He was a good distance back, so it wasn't that obvious, but it was still clear to me that he was trying to follow my sister. We walked out the doors and onto the sidewalk out front. I hadn't really expected the man to leave the store with us, but he did. My sister went to the right and walked along the sidewalk instead of going to the car. I think she was afraid that if we went to the car, the man would follow us home or try to do something. There were other stores that were right next to the Best Buy and stuff though, thankfully, so we walked along the sidewalk until we reached one. It was a large clothing store that was next to the Best Buy, and my sister and I then walked inside of it. Unfortunately, the man following us did the same thing. He even entered the store as well, but he was still a good ways back. My sister told me that she had an idea. When we turned a corner, she quickly took out her car keys and put them in my hand. She told me to split up with her and then leave the store and go get her car, then to park out front and she would then leave. So I then turned and I walked in a different direction than my sister. The man continued to follow her as I walked off. Then I left the store. I walked over to the Best Buy parking lot and then I found my sister's Jeep and got inside. Then I drove around to the entrance of the clothing store and I parked on the side of the curb near the sidewalk out front. I waited for her there. I was there for probably 2 or 3 minutes. Then I saw my sister come walking out of the store very quickly. She then ran all the way to the passenger side door and quickly got inside. I saw the man walking out of the store right after she got in. She told me to step on it and I drove away out of the parking lot. The man was not able to follow us. Most likely his car was still at the Best Buy parking lot. I drove us back home after that, and looking back, that was a scary situation. I'm really glad that I was able to help my sister get away from that guy. This story takes place on one of the best nights for kids around America, but the worst night for me. It was Christmas Eve of 2019. For a little backstory, 3 or 4 months before this event took place, I broke up with my girlfriend. Let's call her Jennifer. The event that caused me to break up with her was she stole over $900 from me. I caught her, and all she said before she left is, "This isn't over." Fast forward 3 months to Christmas Eve. Since we live in Texas and have a house in the hill country, every year on Christmas my family usually goes there to celebrate. However, this year I couldn't make it because I had to work. I was 17 years old and had just got a job at my local supermarket, and I had to work all day of Christmas. I stayed home, but I had no problem with being alone. On Christmas Eve night, it was getting late, probably 11 o'clock or so. I decided to take a shower and go to bed as I needed to get up early the next day. As I started to shower, I heard a strange noise from the garage, sort of like a metallic banging. I thought the noise was coming from the heater because I had put the water as hot as it would go. I took my shower, and when I finished, I went to go get in bed. As I did, I heard the noise again, although this time it was on the other side of the yard. I was confused because I didn't think there was anything over there. I went to go look out the window and see. I looked out and didn't see anything but my backyard, completely empty. I completely disregarded it because my backyard is pretty flat and empty, and it has nowhere for someone to hide. Now it's hard to explain, but my window is fairly large, and it has a blind spot to the left where there's a corner. Somebody could easily hide there, but I was tired and I didn't think about that at all. As I walked off, I heard a bang again, but this time on the window of my house, and as I looked out the window, I saw the figure of a person dressed in all black standing at my window. It made me jump. However, I wasn't too scared as I'm a fairly large dude and a high school football player. This all changed when the person at the window reached for his pocket for what I assumed was a gun. I ran away from the window towards my parents' room to go retrieve my dad's shotgun. I knew he kept it in a safe and had the safe key under his pillow. As I was running to retrieve it, I dialed 911. As soon as the dispatcher answered, I heard the horrific sound of glass shattering. I made it to my parents' room and shut the door quietly. I whispered into the phone what was happening to the dispatcher. She said to stay on the line as the county sheriff was en route, but it would take about 5 minutes or so. I told her I was going to retrieve the shotgun. She said that's not a bad idea, but to only use it if I had to, and to use it with caution. I quickly realized my dad took the gun with him to the hill country because they were going to a gun range. I informed the dispatcher that the gun was gone. She said to make sure to stay on the line. For a moment, everything was silent, and I thought that maybe the burglar or whoever was in my house got spooked when they realized someone was home. My heart sank into my chest when I heard not one, but 2 sets of boots walking up the stairs. I heard a heavy metal pole scraping across the floor. I locked and barricaded the door to my parents' room. Then I almost passed out when I heard one of them talk, not in any voice but Jennifer's. She said, "Merry Christmas, Tommy." Then I heard a male voice mockingly say, "We know you're in there." Then they knocked on the door of my parents' room. I almost screamed and got underneath the bed. Jennifer then said, "Don't worry if you don't open the door. We'll open it for you." I heard the pole hit the door and the lock started jiggling. I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from being too loud. Then, all of a sudden, I heard police sirens and Jennifer muttering curse words. They ran down the stairs to try to leave out the front door when I heard someone yell, "Freeze." I heard a bunch of yelling, and then an officer come in and announce himself and tell anybody in the house to make themselves known. I called out to him saying that I was Tommy, and I dialed 911. He told me to come out slowly with my hands visible. As I left my parents' room, I saw the 2 being escorted out in handcuffs. The rest of my night consisted of paperwork and me talking to my parents, who were making a 3-hour drive to come home and be with me. This incident was very disturbing to me, and I'm grateful that I reacted the way that I did. Had I not, I may not be here right now.
This is something that happened back when I was in high school. It was the night before Christmas, and I was at home. My family and I were in the living room, wrapping gifts and watching Christmas specials. This went on for a while, but at about 11 o'clock or so, I remember that there was a knock on the front door. This was really weird because it was late at night on Christmas Eve. We weren't expecting anybody, so why would someone be knocking on the door? I decided to get up and go and see who it was. I remember that I walked over to the front window and looked out. I saw a man standing there, but I didn't recognize him, so I walked away. I told everyone that it was some guy who I didn't know. The man was not a neighbor that I was aware of, but I didn't really think too much of it in the moment. I just went back to what I was doing before. However, about 30 minutes later, there was a knock on the door again. Once more, I got up to go see. This time, though, I was feeling more suspicious. I didn't think whoever had been there would come back. When I got to the window, I looked out of it, and I saw that not only was the same guy there again, but another man was now with him. 2 guys now stood right outside the front door. This time, they knocked again. My parents started to walk over from the other room, because they were also curious. We all looked out the window for some time at the men, and we were very confused as to why they were there, but ultimately we decided not to answer the door. After the men stood around for like a minute, they finally turned to walk away. But the men were not walking back towards the direction of the street. Instead, the men were both walking around towards the side of our house. At that point, my dad opened up the front door and yelled at them. But this didn't stop the guys. They kept going around all the way to the back end of the house. Now they seemed to be somewhere in the backyard. We then went around to the back of the house. We had a sliding glass door back there that led out to the patio. The yard was not all that big, but there were some trees and bushes back there and stuff. My mom turned on the light and we looked out, but we didn't see the guys. My dad briefly opened a window and yelled at them again. There was no response and we didn't see the men anymore at all. After looking around the yard from the windows for a while, we concluded that the men probably ran away. Most likely they went through another neighbor's backyard or something and took off. We all returned to what we had been doing once again and hanging out in the living room. I was just really curious about it for some reason, so I remember that I decided to go outside and look around, which was a stupid decision. I left the house out the back sliding door and looked around the yard. It was dark out other than the patio light, obviously, so I couldn't see that great, but things were completely silent. I took a few more steps out into the yard. Then, suddenly, out of nowhere, I saw these 2 guys come out from behind a tree in the back of the yard. They both started running straight for me at full speed. I turned around and out of pure instincts ran as fast as I ever have before for the door, and then I went back inside.
I closed the door behind me and locked it just before the men reached it. They tried opening the door and then banged on the doors briefly and then ran away again. This time we called the police. The men did not return though. When the cops got there, the guys were gone and they looked around. They came up empty-handed at our house, but actually located the men walking along a street a few blocks away. I don't know why those men chose to go to our house. I think they were just looking around for a house to rob or something. But I'll never forget seeing them run at me though. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I'm a 20-year-old female, and 2 years ago, my family was having my aunt and cousins over for Christmas. The day before Christmas Eve, I went to a nearby shopping center to get my aunt a last-minute gift. I really had no idea what to get her, but I was finally able to find a nice hat that I was sure she would like. I was looking around the store before leaving, and a man approached me. He was much older than me, but appeared to be maybe in his 30s. He had a shaved head and just immediately seemed kind of creepy. He walked right up to me and asked me how I was doing. I told the man I was good and I was just about to leave. At that point, he asked me where I was going and if I wanted to get some drinks with him. I told him no thanks and then started to walk away. But the man followed me as I did and asked me what was wrong and why I didn't want to go with him. It was clear to me that he was going to keep following me. So eventually, I stopped and turned to him and told him in a firm voice to stop following me. Thankfully, the store was pretty crowded and some people appeared to look over a little bit. The man stepped back and said fine and then walked away. I carefully stayed in the store for a while and then left to make sure that the man wouldn't follow me or anything like that. I got the hat for my aunt and then left the store to go to my car. I got in and began to drive away. But as I started to drive, I noticed an older looking van with the man sticking his head out of the window at me and smiling in the creepiest way possible. It gave me the chills as I drove off, and I was once again careful to make sure that he didn't follow me. I was able to make it back home all right, and the man didn't follow me. But I just feel lucky with how busy the store was, because the way that man was smiling at me was completely insane. This is a story that took place back when I was a kid. I was probably somewhere between the ages of 8 and 10. At that age, I loved Christmas, mainly because of all the things that I would get. I lived with my parents, brother, and sister in a 2-story home in a typical neighborhood. Each year, we would do lots of decorating inside and outside of the house. Our Christmas tree would go in the corner of our living room, and all the presents would go underneath it. On Christmas Eve that year, we went to my grandparents' house, and then we were going to my uncle's on Christmas. That night, on Christmas Eve, after we all went to bed, I had a difficult time falling asleep. I usually did when I was a kid because I was always so excited for Christmas. I finally was able to doze off for a bit, but woke up sometime later when it was still the night. I remember just turning over to try to go back to sleep, but then I thought I heard a noise. It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. My bedroom was the closest to the stairs, and even I could barely hear it. I looked at the clock, and it was 2 a.m. I didn't know why anybody would be up at this hour. Being that young and a curious kid, I decided to go and look. I left my bedroom and then walked a few feet to the railing of the stairs that overlooked the living room. I looked down, and everything seemed normal. All of the lights were off, but the lights from the Christmas tree and the few other decorations were on, so I could see a little bit. I looked down at the tree for a little while longer. It was very large, and we always got the biggest tree that we could find. But then I saw somebody come out from behind the tree. It wasn't my dad or brother, but a random guy that I didn't know. As soon as I realized that it was a random guy, I turned and ran. I went to the end of the hallway where my parents' bedroom was. I woke them up and told them that there was some guy in the house. I remember that my dad got up to look. He came back a short time later and said that he saw somebody leaving the house through the window. The police were called, and when they got out to our house, searched all over our property. They didn't find the guy, but they did find that our window was broken. None of us had heard it break, so the guy must have quietly done it somehow. It was a living room window that was broken, and I think that I saw him not long after he got in the house, because nothing was even stolen. I think that he either saw me or heard me, and that scared him off. I'm just really glad that he didn't try to come upstairs or anything. It still really freaked me out knowing that somebody broke in. It took me a long time to be able to fall back asleep, but eventually I was able to. That was by far my craziest Christmas experience. Nothing like that has happened since, much less on Christmas. I still don't know who the guy was though and why he chose our house. I also don't know if the police ever found him.
This happened many years ago. It was Christmas time, and I went to Dollar Tree to do my Christmas shopping. I had several people that I needed to buy gifts for, and when I got to the store, it was pretty busy. There were a lot of other people around, probably also doing their Christmas shopping. So I shopped around and I found quite a few great gifts for people that I knew they would love. After being inside for maybe 30 minutes or so, I was just about done. At one point though, I remember hearing some yelling and commotion from the other side of the store. I walked over there to see what it was, but it cleared up before I got to the area. So then I finished my shopping and I headed to the checkout. When I got there, I put my items on the conveyor belt, and I was getting quite a few things. I remember that when the cashier started scanning the items, some guy with a basket of stuff walked up right behind me. He then dumped out his basket, mixing his items with mine. The cashier was so busy scanning things that she didn't really notice the guy doing it, and she was going to start scanning his stuff too. His items were mixed with mine, and it seemed like he was trying to get me to buy all his stuff. I stopped everything, telling them both to hold up. I asked the guy what on earth he was doing. He said that he didn't have enough money to pay for all his stuff, so he needed me to get them for him. I told him that if he didn't have the money, not to buy so much stuff. I took all his things and put them back in a basket and made it clear that I was not going to pay for them. The man then took his stuff and walked away. Then the cashier finished scanning my items, and I got them in 2 bags and started walking away. I left the store and went into the parking lot. I was walking to my car when all of a sudden I heard footsteps quickly approaching me from behind. Before I could even look back, they reached me, and I felt somebody try grabbing the bag that was in my left hand. I must have good reflexes because I jerked the bag away and I was able to hold on to it. I then saw the man from inside. He had tried taking my bag from me, and I moved it away from him and asked him what he was doing. The guy just turned around and then went back inside the Dollar Tree. I was convinced at that point that he was either on drugs or there was something wrong with him. After that, I was able to get inside my car and go home. The next day, I saw on the news that police had been at the Dollar Tree. Apparently, the same man punched 2 people inside before the police were called, and he ended up being caught. That must have taken place very shortly after I had left. I'm really glad that he didn't beat me up or anything. It was a really crazy experience, to say the least.
A couple of years ago, I went out to do some Christmas shopping. I had a lot of people to get presents for. I remember on this day, I went to a few stores. When I was in this one store, it was very busy. In fact, the line to check out was extremely long. It went like halfway around the store. I'm not sure if it was always that busy or what, but there were only like 2 or 3 checkouts, so it went by pretty slowly. I got in line and then seriously considered putting my items back and not even waiting in line, but just leaving. But I had already been shopping in the store for like 30 minutes and had gotten a good amount of stuff there. There were at least 3 good presents that I found there, so I figured that I would just wait in line. Maybe it would move by quickly is what I was hoping for. So as I stood there waiting in line, I mostly went on my phone, browsing social media and texting friends. Slowly but surely, we inched along. Many people also got in line behind me. After I was in the line for like 15 minutes already and still had a ways to go, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "I see you." I found this strange and I instantly texted back asking who it was. There was a chance there was somebody that I knew, and for some reason their contact name didn't show up, but just their number. Or maybe it was an old friend who I hadn't texted since I had an old phone. I looked around and did not see anybody who I recognized, but the store was very busy, so I could have missed someone. They texted back pretty quickly saying, "I'm in line with you." This made me realize that they were in fact at the store with me. If it was a random prank, they would not have known that I was in line. I texted back asking again who this was, but they didn't respond. I kept looking around at everyone trying to figure out who was texting me, but I had no idea, and people were starting to give me weird looks because I kept looking around. Eventually, I was close to the front of the line. I got another text then which said, "I can still see you." I had been hoping that it was an old friend or something, but what concerned me was the fact that if it was an actual friend, why wouldn't they respond and say who they were when I asked them? Plus, I didn't see anybody that I recognized. I ignored this text, and soon it was my turn to check out. I did so and then left the store. I went out to my car, which was in the crowded parking lot. When I got there and went inside, I saw that there was another text. This one said, "Are you going home now?" It creeped me out to see that. I felt like if I left, I would be followed, so I didn't want to drive away just yet. I started looking around, wondering who was doing this. They must be able to see me. I didn't really think that I would find out who was texting me though. I just kept looking around, now scanning the parking lot and the other cars. But then I saw something. A row over, parked sort of across from me, was a car with a guy in the driver's seat, just kind of looking in my direction. I looked away and looked at my phone, but sort of half kept an eye on this guy. I was waiting for him to leave. As long as I sat there though, he did as well. Soon I became sure that it was him. Then I got another text from the number. It said, "Are you going to leave or what?" I was now even more sure that it was this guy. I was really creeped out knowing that he would probably follow me, so I quickly got out of my car and then walked back to the store. Just as I was entering though, I happened to see this strong-looking man and his wife leaving. I had an idea and told them about what happened quickly. Thankfully, they didn't think that I was crazy. I asked the guy to walk over to the one man's car. He didn't have a problem with it and walked right over. However, before he got there, the guy drove away. I was glad that he was gone. Then I went back to my car. When I got inside, I got another text. It said, "Now what did you do that for?" I blocked the number and then drove home. I still don't know who that guy was or how he got my number.
Christmas has always been my favorite holiday of the year, a time where your dreams are meant to come true. Well, this story I'm about to tell you happened to me around 27 years ago. I'm 34 now. It all started 2 days before Christmas. My parents needed to get some last-minute Christmas shopping in before the big day arrived, and my parents dropped me off at one of those North Pole Santa grottos in the center of the mall. They told me they would take just about 15 minutes. I sighed and started to walk over to the stereotypical mall Santa. White, long beard, big red coat, and everything you can expect from Santa Claus. The line wasn't too long, so I easily got my turn with Santa in less than a few minutes. The man, looking to be in his 60s with his Santa beard looking like it hadn't been washed in weeks, called me over to him and sat me on his knee. He asked me what it was I wanted for Christmas. I replied saying I just wanted the new Nintendo. It was one of the early Nintendos at the time, and every kid wanted it. The old man replied with a very strange answer that hit me by surprise. He asked me for my home address, so he could, quote, know where to deliver my gift. And of course, I fell for his trick, as I was only 7 at the time, and believed in all the magical fantasies that Santa Claus was going to visit me on Christmas Day. I gave him my address and he dismissed me. He gave me one last smile and wave as I ran off into the crowd to meet my parents, who were now in the clothing store next to the grotto. I wish this is where my story ended, but what happened on Christmas Eve still haunts me to this day. I woke up to a dark and quiet room. It was still pitch black outside, with the winter snow piling up my bedroom window. I was dehydrated and felt like I needed to get a glass of water downstairs from the kitchen before I tried to get more sleep. However, it struck me that I would have to go past the Christmas tree to get to the kitchen. My parents always said that I'm not allowed in the living room until the morning because Santa would see me. The thirst overcame me, and I forced myself out of my room and into the balcony overlooking the living room. But something caught my eye. There was this very tall person in a long red robe wearing the same Santa hat. He also had a big red sack of presents. I quietly opened the door into my 5-year-old sister's room to wake her and tell her that Santa was here. But when I entered the room, she was gone. This surprised me, as she normally won't leave her room like this at this time of night. I made my way back to the balcony, and I watched in horror as 3 men who all appeared to be in their late 30s were wearing elf costumes, and they entered the room. I saw my sister being given a gift from the guy dressed up as Santa, and the 3 other men leading her outside of the front door. I screamed and yelled. All 4 of the men backed out of the door, leaving my sister in tears. Not realizing the situation, I told her the story and forced her not to tell our parents. Then I put her back in her room.
I made my way back to my room and went to sleep, forgetting all about the water. I just wanted to pretend like the night never happened. To this day, I still don't know what happened, but I never saw that dirty old Santa at the mall again. However, I'm sure that it was him at my house that night. This happened when I was a kid. It was Christmas time and I was very excited about it. I think I was probably about 7 or 8 years old at the time. Back then, I always had a hard time sleeping on the night before Christmas. I was really excited for all the presents that I would be getting the next morning. I was thinking about all the toys that I asked for and that kind of stuff. It was one of the most exciting days of the year. So I remember that I went to sleep that night and I woke up at about 5 a.m. on Christmas morning. I remember looking at the clock and seeing that was the time. Nobody else was up, and nobody else would probably be up for a couple more hours. I actually tried to go back to sleep, but was wide awake and too excited. I considered waking everybody else up, but elected not to, because I knew they wouldn't want to get up at 5. It was obviously still dark outside, and the house was completely quiet. I got up and left my bedroom and walked out into the hallway. Then I went downstairs and went into the living room. I started looking out of the window for some reason, just looking around. It looked out to our front yard and the street. Not long after I started looking out the window, though, I saw something. There was a car parked on the side of the road across the street, which was not an uncommon sight, but I saw the door to the car open and a man get out. He started walking across the street and then surprisingly walked into our front yard. The man started walking through the yard and I could not believe it. I didn't recognize him at all either. After entering our front yard, I ducked down from the window. I curled up into a ball on the floor and was scared. Moments later, I heard footsteps outside, and they started moving closer to the door. But then the guy outside seemed to go to the side. The next thing I knew, I heard footsteps literally right outside the window that I was next to. All the lights in our house were off, except for some lights coming from the Christmas decorations like the tree. Things were quiet for a few moments. Then I decided to look up. When I did, I saw the man standing right on the other side of the window and looking in. I wasn't sure if he saw me or not because he was not looking in my direction. I quickly moved away from there and then turned on a light switch. As soon as I did, the man turned around and ran away through the yard. He went back across the street and got into the car and drove away. I was so scared that I ran upstairs and woke up my parents. After that, though, the man never came back and we didn't call the cops or anything. Nothing like that ever happened again when we lived there. It's really weird how I just so happened to wake up before that. I'm not sure if the man was planning to break in or what, but it was very weird. This is something that happened just last year. I work at a very large and popular mall. It has hundreds of stores in it, and we get countless shoppers each year. On weekends around the holidays, it's even more busy. Particularly the weekends leading up to Christmas, it can be chaos at times. The store that I work at is a shoe store, and we sell a few other products as well. It's fairly popular though, so we're just as busy as any store when the mall is crowded. In fact, at times we had to limit the amount of people that can enter the store at once, because our space is not very large. One weekend last year, I was working along with 4 other coworkers. On a normal day, there might be 2 of us working at once, but we knew that it was going to be busy. As I was working on this very busy day, things got really hectic. The store was packed, everybody was looking at shoes and buying them, and all of us employees were kept busy. There were constantly questions about products and people were everywhere. This went on for hours. At one point, a man came up to me and asked if we had a shoe in a certain size. I knew that we had going into the day and told him yes. The guy seemed kind of frustrated already. He had been looking for the shoe and he couldn't find any of the shoes that he wanted in the store, but I knew that we kept some in the back. Well, it turned out that I was wrong. We had some when the day started, but they all sold and I didn't know that. Now we were completely out. So I went into the back room and realized that they were all gone. I went back out and told the guy that we actually just sold out of them. This man got way more angry than I was expecting. He instantly started cursing at me and saying that I was a liar and stuff. I apologized and offered to give him some other stores that they might be at, but the guy said no. He continued to yell at me and some of the people nearby started to notice. The store was still packed, and when the guy wouldn't stop yelling at me, this other guy who was nearby stepped between us. After that, the angry guy seemed to calm down a little bit, but then he said to me that he would be back and he would get me, whatever that meant. Then he turned and left. I just thought that it was an empty threat. The man was gone now, and I felt better. I went back to work, and we stayed extremely busy. The store was messed up from stuff being out of place, and there were customers everywhere, so it was a constant work of us trying to reorganize the store, help customers, and things like that. By 6 o'clock, things finally started to calm down. We closed at 8, and the last 2 hours were much calmer. Finally, by 7:30, all the other employees left except for me and 2 others. Us 3 were working until close. Each of us knew how to close the store. The mall closed at 8 as well as our store, so by now the entire mall was pretty quiet. When several of us would work until close, we would kind of switch off at who would stay last and finish up the closing tasks. On this night, it was my turn to. At 8 o'clock, the 2 others left, and I stayed to finish things. I would be there only about another 15 minutes or so. As I finished things up, a while later, I saw out the front window of the store the same man from earlier. He was already looking at me. Our store was closed now, and the doors were locked. The mall was also now closed. Everybody was supposed to leave, but there were still a few people lingering in the hallways. The guy was standing in front of the store and just staring at me. This made me nervous. He said that he would be back, and now he was. And I was alone in the store. He couldn't get in, but I was leaving soon. What was this guy going to do? I stayed in there and finished up, and went out of the guy's sight for a while. When I was done and wanted to leave, I saw that he was still there. So I didn't leave yet. I was afraid that if I did, he would do something or follow me out to my car. I didn't know. Now, this guy was basically the only person out in the hallways. I didn't leave and instead went back into the back area of the store out of his sight. I came back a minute or so later to see if he was still there, and he was. But then I saw a security guard approach him and tell him that he had to leave. Within moments, the guy was walking away with the security guard basically kicking him out of the mall. I was so glad to see that. I waited inside still for another couple minutes, and then I left and headed home. I walked through the now empty mall and then left to go into the parking garage. That's where I typically parked. The garage was practically empty now as well, with only a few cars scattered around here and there. I made my way to my vehicle, but before I got there, I heard a voice from sort of behind me. I looked and saw the same guy. He was standing a ways away in the parking lot. I have no idea how he knew I would be there or if it was just a coincidence, but nevertheless, he was here. I saw him start to angrily walk towards me. I turned and just started running for my car. I sprinted until I got there and then quickly went inside. Then I did not waste a second and locked the doors, started my car, and left. The man did not reach me yet. I left him standing there in the parking garage and I drove home. After that, I never saw him again. I was kind of paranoid that he was going to show up sometime at the store. Thankfully, he never did, at least not when I was working. I can't believe that he got so mad about that. It was an honest mistake, and I was just trying to help the guy. Some people have anger problems, though. This happened 2 years ago at Christmas time. I worked in a pretty large office with a lot of other people. Every year, our department of about 20-something people has a little party with a gift exchange. I remember that a couple of days before the party, I went to the store to get my gift. We all drew names to see what other person we would have to buy a gift for. I drew Amanda, who was a pretty good friend of mine. While I was at the store trying to figure out what to get her, I happened to notice another coworker there. It was a guy named Mike, who, to be honest, always seemed like a pretty strange guy. He didn't really work that close to me and was in another room, but he would work in the same general area. I had heard some things about him over my time working there, and I myself had some awkward conversations with him. So when I noticed him, I really didn't want to go over and say hi, and I didn't think that he noticed me. He was just standing a good distance away and was not looking in my direction when I saw him. So I just finished my shopping and then I left the store. So when the Christmas party arrived, I got there and it was what you would expect for the most part. When it was time for the gift exchange, we all opened the things that we got for each other. The gift that I was receiving came from Mike apparently. What he got for me was a teddy bear with hearts on it. I said thanks and that it was very nice. The rest of the party went on pretty normal. Overall, it was fine, and I went home after that. For the next few days, things went on like normal. But one night, I was at home by myself. I lived alone in a smaller house that I was renting in a neighborhood. I was just having a nice relaxing night to that point. When it got late though, and I was about to go to bed, I happened to glance out of a window. What I saw was what appeared to be a person quickly going behind a bush near my house in the front yard. It happened so fast that I couldn't tell who it was or anything, but obviously this was very suspicious. I was now nervous to go to bed, thinking that somebody might be prowling around or trying to break in. I went and made sure that every door was locked and every window was closed, which they were. When I moved to the back of the house to check there, I heard somebody try opening the front door. That's what really got me nervous. At that point, I went over to my phone ready to call the police. Then I went to another window and I looked, but nobody was at the door any longer. Whoever it was must have moved. I wasn't sure if they had left or not, so I just kind of stayed there at the front window looking around. I didn't see anything for probably several minutes. Then I saw somebody come out from behind my car in the driveway. It was a man and he was walking closer to the house. Then I realized that it was Mike. When I saw him, I quickly moved away from the window. I couldn't believe that he was at my house. I had no idea how he would even know where I lived. Moments later, he tried the front door again. Now I decided to call the police. I dialed 911 and then went into my bedroom where I felt safer. When I was in there, I heard a loud bang at the other end of the house. I feared that Mike may have been trying to break in. I didn't know why, but he had always kind of given me the creeps. I stayed in my bedroom for the next few minutes. The police got there very fast. The next thing I knew, I heard police and I looked out of my bedroom window and I saw several police vehicles outside. Mike was arrested for attempting to break into my house. With a further investigation, I found out that Mike did not originally have me for the gift exchange. When he found out who did, he traded with them, saying that he had the perfect idea for me. And inside the teddy bear was an AirTag, which is how he knew my location. This information really freaked me out, but I was also very glad that he had been caught.
Last year in December, I went to the mall by myself to do a little Christmas shopping. I had a list of people that I needed to get gifts for, and it just so happens that I live pretty close to a very large mall. There are several levels in the mall and just about every store that you could ever want there. Mostly, I had ideas of what I wanted to get for people, but I also knew I would find more stuff there. I got to the mall pretty early and ended up shopping there all day. I got some stuff for myself there as well. The mall was very busy with it being Christmas time. There were lots of other people doing their shopping also, and that made things take much longer. As the day went on, I had more and more bags in my hands. By the end of the day, I was lugging around what felt like 10 shopping bags. My hands were completely full. Finally, that night, I left the mall and drove back home. I arrived back at my house where I lived by myself. When I got back, I started to unpack all the stuff that I got. When I got to one of the last bags, I noticed something strange. It was from a clothing store, and all the clothes that I bought were in the bag. But then there was also an Apple AirTag inside of the bag as well. I had not bought an AirTag. I didn't know how it got there, and I was curious as to what it even was at first, because I had never used an AirTag before or seen one up close. After realizing what it was, I was thinking for the longest time about how it got there. I had not been to the Apple store. I thought that maybe somebody dropped it in my bag, and I realized that maybe somebody purposely put it in there to track me or something. That's when I started to get really paranoid. I'd been home for a little while by then, maybe an hour. I went around my house and started looking out all the windows. When I got to the front though, believe it or not, I saw a car parked on the side of the road sort of across the street with the engine running. The lights were off in the car, but I could see smoke coming out of the exhaust in the back as it was a chilly night. In the dark, I could not see who was in the car, but could tell that there was one person inside in the driver's seat. My street would get cars parked on the side of it sometimes, as I lived fairly close to the city, but this obviously had me paranoid from the AirTag being planted in one of my shopping bags. I kept watching the car from my window, staring at it for almost 2 minutes straight. Then I saw it suddenly pull out of its spot and drive away, never turning on its headlights. That seemed suspicious to me, but I didn't know if I was just being paranoid and crazy or if that was actually someone who was tracking me. After that, I covered all my windows and I went online to try to figure out how to deactivate an AirTag. I was able to find out how to turn it off, but I hoped that it wouldn't be too late. Someone may already know where I was, especially if it was the person in that car. Nevertheless, I did feel a little better with the AirTag now being off, and I put it in the trash. However, that was not the end of it. Several hours later, it was now late at night. I was in my bedroom when I heard the sound of my back door rattling. Immediately, I remembered everything: the AirTag, the car parked outside, and I grabbed my cell phone and was ready to hit 911. I carefully emerged from my bedroom. There was still someone at the back door, which meant that they were in my backyard, and I didn't hesitate and called the cops. I told them everything and was told that somebody would be there shortly. About a minute later, I heard a knocking at one of my back windows. I didn't dare to look out of any of the windows though, so I couldn't tell who was there. But then I stopped hearing anything. The next thing I heard was the cops knocking at the front door minutes later. I answered and they looked around, but whoever had been at my place was gone. I was disappointed that they didn't catch them. However, after that night, nothing else weird happened. I'm thinking that whoever tried to enter my house and tracked me from the mall saw the police and decided not to go back. I also think that it was easy for someone to discreetly drop the AirTag in my bag in the mall without me noticing. It still gives me the creeps that it actually happened though.
This story happened 4 years ago on Christmas Eve. I live with my wife sort of out in the country. The houses in my neighborhood are kind of spaced out, and we have a fairly big yard. That's why on Christmas Eve at about 9 p.m. at night, I was really surprised to hear knocking coming from the front door of our house. I walked over to the window to get a look outside and see who was there, but when I looked, there was nobody. I went around to every window that I could, and I looked to see if anybody was outside, but I couldn't see anyone at all, although it was pretty dark out. It was strange to say the least, but I figured it was probably some kind of prank. I thought, what else could it be? We got some snow that night, and the next morning when I woke up, we could see there was a bunch of footprints all over our backyard which hadn't been there the night before. The creepy part was they seemed to be headed towards my shed that I had in the back. I was concerned, so I decided to take a walk out to my shed to see if anything happened to it or if anything was missing inside. I walked out there, and once I arrived, I opened it up. As soon as I did, I saw a man in the corner turn around and then start charging at me. I turned and ran back for my house. Luckily, I was able to make it back inside before the man. I quickly called the police and watched from the window as the man went back into my shed. The police arrived a while later and arrested the man. He turned out to be on drugs and had wandered into the area.
This happened just last year. I was going last-minute Christmas shopping to find a couple of gifts. I had bought stuff for everyone, but I felt like a few of my gifts were just kind of lame, so I went out to the mall to see if I could find anything else. It was the day before Christmas Eve, so the mall was packed. There were cars everywhere in the parking lot, and when I got inside the mall, I saw that it was just as busy in there. This mall was pretty large, and it had many of the popular stores and restaurants. I started out by going to a few of the usual stores that I went to typically when I was there. I did end up finding a couple of good gifts throughout the first couple of stores. I kept on shopping though, and when I was in my third store of the day, which was a clothing store, I noticed this one woman in there. I didn't think anything of her at all, but when I saw her in the next store that I was shopping in, that's when I realized that she was there too. A few stores later, and I saw her again, this time looking at me, and she was walking a ways behind me. I still considered this a coincidence. That is, until I was walking in one of the mall walkways between stores, and I saw the woman walking a ways back behind me. She was fairly short and wore a black jacket and sunglasses. I got the idea that she might be following me for some reason. I decided to randomly stop and then just stand around as if I was going to a nearby coffee shop. The woman stopped as well, and this confirmed it to me. I wasn't really sure what to do though. I had no clue why she would be following me. I decided to just ignore her and keep shopping. I went to about 3 more stores. Occasionally, I would look around or behind me and typically would see the woman. I wasn't sure if she knew that I knew she was following me or not. Eventually, I was finally done shopping after being in the mall for probably about 2 hours. I walked over to the exits near the parking lot where my car was parked. When I got out to the doors, I saw the woman behind me was going to leave as well. Now, I was a little bit concerned that she was going to follow me home in her car or something like that. When I got outside the mall, I literally sprinted into the parking lot and ducked behind the first car that I saw. It might sound crazy to you, because it kind of sounds crazy to me now as I'm writing this, but that's what came to my mind at the time. I barely saw the woman walking out, and I used the many cars in the parking lot to shield myself from her vision. I walked between rows of cars, ducking down, as the woman walked closer and seemed to be looking around. It's as if she knew I was hiding, because she had either seen me run behind a car, or she knew I wouldn't disappear that quickly out of her sight. Slowly and carefully, I inched closer to where my car was parked. I knew the woman was nearby, but I couldn't see her. Finally, I saw my car in sight. I was even more careful to get close to it, and when I reached it, I got inside the back door and then ducked down in the back seat so I wouldn't be seen. I carefully looked out the window and saw the woman a little ways away. I watched her stand around there for a good 3 or 4 minutes until I saw a car drive up and the woman get inside of it. Then they left. I never found out why she was following me for such a long time.
This is the story of something scary that happened on Christmas a couple of years ago now. So I live with my wife in a house that has a decent-sized backyard. Aside from the yard, the neighborhood has a lot of houses in it. That year, the Christmas season had been busy with work parties and family gatherings. We left a family event on the night of Christmas Eve just in time as it started snowing. The snowfall got heavier and heavier, and soon it turned into a bit of a blizzard. The snow was coming down quite a bit when it got later at night, and to that point there had not been any snow on the ground at all. My wife was happy that there would be a white Christmas with snow on the ground now, which she prefers over not snow. I didn't really care because it meant that I had to shovel the driveway and patio the following morning. Anyways, we went to bed and the snowfall stopped sometime overnight. When I woke up on Christmas morning, it was no longer snowing. I got up just after sunrise and went downstairs. When I did, I went to a back window to observe the snowfall from the previous night's storm. It was probably a good 3 or 4 inches, and the yard was covered in white snow. However, I noticed something odd. There were footprints, human footprints, leading from the back of our yard coming out of the woods. They went all the way over to the back door area and then off to the side a little out of my sight. I did not know whose footprints those would possibly be from other than my wife. It seemed a little bit suspicious. I went over to my wife and asked her if she had gone outside the previous night at all, and she said no. I didn't bother to go out back, and I figured that someone must have walked through the yard for some reason, but were gone now. I was wondering if someone had tried breaking in. However, there was no sign of anybody getting in the house. All the windows and doors were locked to my knowledge, and nothing seemed out of place. We were going to be going to my in-laws that day for Christmas. Before leaving that morning, I decided that I better shovel the driveway already. So I went into the garage where the shovels are as well as my cars. It's attached to the house, but when I did, I instantly heard movement. It was like somebody else was in there. I looked over to the mostly dark garage and saw someone. It was some guy, and he was headed in my direction. I quickly moved back and went into the house again. I only saw the guy for maybe a second. When I got back inside, I locked the door behind me, and soon after the guy tried opening it. Then I heard him moving away from the door. Not more than 30 seconds later, I heard my wife in the other room say that there was a man running through the backyard. I went over and he was gone by the time I got there. I told her about it and we realized that's where the footsteps had come from. It was the man. I have no idea who he was though. However, I also realized that I must have left the back door leading to the garage unlocked. That's the only way he could have entered. At the end of the day, I'm just glad that he left. But it was very scary how he first tried coming after me and entering the house. This happened many years ago now, but it's something that I will never forget. It was in the early 2000s, and at the time, I was a young single mother with 2 sons aged 7 and 4. There was a new video game system that my sons had been talking about all year, mainly my older son. I was planning to get it for them for Christmas, but I didn't have a whole lot of money to spend. For Black Friday, the local Walmart was having a huge sale, and the video game system was one of the things that was on sale. I knew that it was a great opportunity for me to buy it, and I made plans to go to Walmart. So for Thanksgiving, we stayed at my parents' house, and that allowed me to get up early and go shopping by myself the next day. Walmart opened at 6 a.m. that year on Black Friday, I believe, so I got up before the crack of dawn and drove there. When I arrived, the store had not opened yet, and it was still completely dark outside. However, the parking lot was packed, and I had to park sort of at the back of it. There were people lined up outside the store and walking to the front from the parking lot. I had never seen it like this before. I walked up to the store and got as close as I could, but I was still behind a bunch of people in line. I had only got there about 5 minutes before they opened. Camping out in a tent overnight or something like that wasn't really an option for me. I hoped that I would still have enough time to get the video games, and I felt confident about it. Soon enough, I remember hearing the crowd cheer and the doors opened. I watched countless people run inside the store and inched closer with the people that I was near. About a minute went by before I was able to enter. By the time I got inside the store, there were literally people everywhere. I remember that the electronics department was at the back of the store, so I tried to walk as quick as I could, but there were so many people that it took forever. By the time I made it there, I looked around for the video games. Unfortunately, they were gone. I looked around the electronics department for at least 10 or 20 minutes. I was just hoping that I would find it or that there would be one somewhere, but it seemed as though it had sold out. Finally, there was an employee available to talk to, and he told me that they didn't have any left. I was very disappointed. I decided to try another store to see if maybe they had a similar deal. I hadn't really looked in all the advertisements in the paper the day before because I had been banking on Walmart to work out. I was surprised just how fast the video games sold. So I left the Walmart store and the mob of people. I walked through the parking lot back to my car. However, when I got near it, I saw something strange. There was a guy with a large SUV and the back of it was open. He was standing there selling electronics out of the back of his car. He was parked at the way back of the parking lot, kind of in the corner where there was actually a little bit of space. I saw a couple of people standing around and talking to him, but there wasn't like a crowd or anything. When I realized this, it seemed kind of shady, but I thought that maybe there was a chance he had the video games that I wanted to buy. So I walked over to him. When I approached, I saw mostly other electronics, but I did see a few video games. When I walked up, he told me that he had stuff cheaper than they were selling inside. I asked him if he had any of the video game systems that I was looking for. He looked in the back of his SUV for a moment, which had a lot of stuff in it. There were boxes and wires and all kinds of stuff back there. He told me that he didn't have any with him at the moment, but he said that he did have some back at his shop, which was not far away. Now, the whole thing seemed sketchy, like I said. I didn't think this guy was supposed to be selling stuff, and Walmart would probably shut him down or call the cops on him. But I was angry for missing out after waking up at 6 a.m., so I didn't really care in the moment. I asked the guy where his shop was and what it was called. He said that it was his place, and he said that he would take me there quick. I was surprised to hear that. I thought maybe he would go back there and come back. I said that I could go to my car and just follow him, but he said no. He said that we could go there quick, and it was just down the road, and then he would drive me back to Walmart. The guy was bald, sort of strong looking, and had a bit of a beard. I told him okay, and then I went around and got into his car. This was a stupid idea to begin with, but at the moment it didn't seem that bad. The man got into the driver's seat and then started driving. He left the Walmart parking lot and turned onto a dark and quiet road. I told the man how crazy it was inside the store and how I really wanted to get the video games for my son. He said that he had several gaming systems and he would sell it to me for cheaper than the sale at Walmart. Aside from it seeming really sketchy, the guy did seem pretty nice. Things then went quiet in the car for the most part. He drove down that road and then turned. It was still dark out and I wasn't quite sure exactly where we were going. After we were driving down that road for at least more than 5 minutes, I started to get nervous. The guy made it sound like his shop wasn't that far away. After driving down the road for a while, he turned again. Then we went down that road for at least another 5 minutes. I no longer knew where we were anymore. I asked the guy how much farther away his place was. He just said that it wasn't much farther. Then he turned on this one road that was even quieter. I was getting a bad feeling that I should not have gotten into the car with the guy. We drove down this really quiet road for at least another 10 minutes. Now we were driving for close to half an hour. At that point, I just wanted to get out of there. Nobody was saying anything. I sensed a change in the guy's overall personality. I was now afraid to say anything. I felt like if I asked again, he would tell me that he was kidnapping me or something. The guy now almost seemed to be angry. We kept driving and came up to a red light. That was just what I wanted to see. It was this quiet intersection and there were really no other cars on the road. The area was more rural here, with woods off in the distance. As soon as the man stopped at the red light, I just grabbed the door handle. Thankfully, it opened. I jumped out of the guy's truck and just ran for it. He did not try to stop me. I went to the right in the intersection and noticed this small little gas station down the road. I saw the man's truck go straight, driving away from me. I went to the gas station and went inside. There I called my parents, who were able to come and get me. When they heard about what happened, they were just glad that I was okay. My parents and I ended up buying the video games for my son together that year at a higher price from another store. So I guess it all worked out, but I'm really glad that I got out of that guy's car when I did. I'm not sure where we were going. I should have never gotten the car to begin with. That guy was already being sketchy for selling stuff out of the back of his car in a Walmart parking lot. I enjoyed taking solo camping trips, as it's an easy way for me to just relax and chill. I went into the mountains this past Christmas morning and set up my tent in a campsite near a pretty popular mountain range near my house. I had zero Christmas plans, so I thought I would go camping instead of sitting at home alone. I also thought it would be an awesome time because I imagined there would be very little people at the site with me. I was correct, but surprised that I was actually the only person there. Everything was totally fine, and I was enjoying myself. I decided to call it an early night since I did a pretty large hike earlier and it wore me out. At about 8 p.m., I started to clean up everything, and I got in my tent to get warm and settle down for the night. I fell asleep very quickly. At about 3:15 a.m., I woke up to the zipper of my tent unzipping very slowly. I'm a super light sleeper on these winter camping trips, probably because my body unconsciously stays on guard when I go out alone. I also placed my head by the entrance of the tent for this very reason, so I could hear someone attempting to enter my tent. I woke up and immediately understood someone was coming into my tent. I have a handgun I bring with me for protection, but have never fired it outside of the shooting range. Never once have I been put in a situation where I needed to. Therefore, my adrenaline immediately shot up. I slowly grabbed my handgun and faced it towards the entrance and decided to announce myself. I yelled, "I have a gun and I will shoot you in 5 seconds if I don't hear you run off right now and leave me alone." It was silent for about 3 seconds until I heard someone start running off. I kept my handgun facing the entrance for another 10 minutes, just waiting for any sort of movement at all. I heard nothing, so I decided to grab my phone and call the police. They were around 20 minutes away from me, so I sat there still in defensive mode waiting. When the cops arrived, I came out of the tent and announced I was the caller. I gave them my story and they decided to look around in the area a little. Not even 15 feet away from the campsite, they found some dude trying to hide in a tree. It didn't work very well because it was winter and the tree was all bare. It ended up being some dude who took mushrooms at another campsite nearby on one of the other sides of the mountain. He had gotten lost after walking around and thought that my tent was his. He was a younger guy in his 20s and I could tell he was pretty shaken up. They were putting him in the back of the cop car and he yelled out at me, "Man, I'm sorry about that. That was my bad." The cops asked if I wanted to press any charges and I told the cops not to worry about it. I was angry about it though still, and even though this dude was lying about thinking my tent was his, I knew he was harmless and he was just a dumb dude who was high. Regardless of if they were actually going to arrest him or not, I packed up my stuff and I left the campsite. There was no way I could have fallen asleep after getting a scare like that while solo camping in the middle of the winter.
Back in the day, I used to work at Sears. This is when they were doing really well and had tons of stores. If anybody doesn't remember Sears, they were a large department store that sold many things like appliances and clothes. It's mostly gone out of business in recent years though. But when I worked there, we would get lots of people in the store. Well, one time I was working a long day in December. With it being around Christmas time, there were lots of people shopping for gifts and stuff. It was also a weekend, so that added to it. I worked basically all day and I saw countless people. When I was finally off of work, I was happy to go home and was tired. So I just remember that I clocked out of work and then left the store. I went out to my car and then drove back home. It took maybe 15 minutes or so to get back. Then I parked my car in the driveway and got out of it. However, as I was walking up to my front door, I heard a car coming down the street, which was usually very quiet. I noticed it but didn't really think that much of it at all, and I kept going.
However, as I was opening my door to go inside, I happened to hear the car slowing down. I looked over to see that the car was starting to pull over to the side of the street in front of my house. So I stopped and I kept watching it because I wanted to see what this car was doing. I did not recognize the car as a neighbor or anybody that I knew. The car pulled over and came to a stop just in front of my mailbox. Then the driver's window rolled down a little, and I saw somebody open up my mailbox and then put something inside of it. I couldn't really tell who the person was from where I was. I think it was a man, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, I didn't really know what this person was doing or what they had put in my mailbox. After that, they rolled their window back up and then they drove away. I went back outside, and after seeing that the car was out of my sight, I walked down to my mailbox. I opened it and I looked inside to see an unmarked envelope. I brought it inside. When I opened up the envelope, there were several Polaroid pictures in it. They were all pictures of me. The first were me working at Sears earlier that day when I was at the registers working as a cashier. I had not known that any of these photos were taken. They were taken at a distance too, so it was not obvious to me and I never noticed it. There was then a photo of me walking in the store, I think when I went on my break. And the last photo was of me walking out to my car in the parking lot after work. This was clearly taken from inside of a car that was also in the parking lot. I hadn't noticed any of them. Of course, I was very freaked out by this. I didn't know what to do about it or anything. I didn't go to the police or report it, but I did tell my friends as well as coworkers. They were all just as confused as I was. The rest of my time working at Sears, I didn't notice anything else like that, and I never saw that car at my house again. I'm not sure where the pictures are. I think I still have them somewhere, but I couldn't find them. It's been so long. But I'd still like to know why that person did that. Was it just an elaborate prank? Why would they choose me though? And they must have followed me home without me noticing. It's all very strange.
A few years back, we were hosting a Christmas party at our house. There were lots of family members there. My sister was there, as well as my brother and sister-in-law and their kids, among other people. We have a decent-sized house for hosting people and have a good amount of gatherings there. So hours into the party, it was now evening time and dark out. Most people were hanging out in the living room and dining room as well. I remember that I heard there was a knock on the front door, and I went over to go and see who was there. Everybody that had been invited to the party was already there and had been there for hours, so I really didn't know who it could be. When I opened the door, I saw a man standing there dressed as an elf. He kind of resembled Will Ferrell's character in the movie Elf. I remember thinking that he looked like him kind of. However, I had no idea who the guy was. He was not a neighbor and was not a family member or friend. And our neighborhood is pretty quiet. It's not the type of place where people just hang out and walk down the street. It was a strange sight to see, but I laughed a little bit and asked how I could help him. The man did not mention anything about his costume and simply asked if he could come inside. I asked him why, and he said that he was cold and wanted to warm up. When he spoke, he immediately seemed to be drunk or something like that. I asked him where he had come from. The guy responded by saying, "Don't worry about it." I told him that I had family over, so I could not let him in the house, and I asked him if he could call someone to get him or something. The guy got agitated and said, "No, man, just let me in your house." I told him no and said that I was going back inside now. Then I went back in and shut the door. When I did, I obviously locked it. However, as soon as the door locked, the knob instantly started rattling on the other side. The man was trying to come in. I was glad that I locked it. I went over to the window next to the front door. The man stood there for a few moments before finally turning and walking away back down the driveway. When he was gone, I walked back over to the dining room at the back of the house. I was trying to find my wife to tell her about the weird encounter, and the last I had seen her, she had been in there. As I looked around for her, after about a minute later, I heard the sound of kids screaming coming from over in the living room. The sound was quickly followed by something hitting the window. I quickly went into the living room to see the elf man. He was standing right up against a large living room window outside and was loudly banging on it. As he was, he started yelling, making crazy-looking faces. The kids were terrified, most of them being preschool or kindergarten age. I went over to the blinds and scrambled to close them and tried to wave the crazy elf man away. He was angrily trying to break down the window, it seemed. The kids' parents tried to calm them down as I finished covering the windows and then got out my phone to call the cops. The elf man was ruining my party. I went around to the front door and then left the house to find the guy and give him a piece of my mind. When I got outside, the guy turned and started sprinting in my direction. By this point, I was angry and was not backing down. I figured that the guy would try to fight me, and my thought was bring it on. As the man ran towards me, I squared up. However, when he was still running at me at full speed and got within maybe 6 feet of me, he suddenly jumped up. He did this sort of flying kick and it got me right in the chest. I fell backwards on my rear end. The man then got up and quickly started sprinting away out of the yard. I was not injured, but by the time I got up, the man was already almost out of the yard, and I didn't bother to chase after him. He then sprinted down the street and out of my sight. The police arrived about 5 minutes later. I told them everything and showed them where the man had gone. They looked around the neighborhood for a while, but he was never found. It was the weirdest thing. The man just came out of nowhere dressed as an elf, ruined my Christmas party, scared the kids, assaulted me, and then took off never to be seen again. Christmas, everyone's favorite time of the year. It was certainly my favorite time of the year until one night that changed everything. And that one night changed my life forever. The Christmas of 2018, I was sitting in my living room watching the snow get heavier and heavier. I was enjoying myself drinking a cup of hot cocoa until I heard a knock at my door. I thought, who could it be at this hour? It was 1:18 in the morning. I got up to open the door, and to my surprise, I saw nobody. I closed the door, thinking I was being ding-dong ditched, or it was all in my head. 5 minutes later, another knock on my door. I once again got up to open the door, and when I saw nobody, I sighed and shut it. Almost immediately after, another knock on my door, and this time, I was quick enough to swing the door open, and I could just get a glimpse of a kid. He looked to be about 5 or 6 years old, running towards a house that was adjacent to mine. Surprisingly, I never knew who lived there, and quite frankly, I never seemed to care. However, this time I wanted to know why such a little kid was roaming out in the middle of the night, so I planned to go over there the next morning. Morning finally came, and I headed towards the house where I was sure I saw the little boy run into. When I knocked on the door, nobody answered. I figured they weren't home and I would come back later. That evening, I tried going back to the house and once again knocked. There was no answer again. I thought to myself this was quite strange. I then tried the door angle, and to my surprise, the door wasn't locked. Curiosity got the better of me, and I unlawfully entered the house knowing I was breaking and entering. As soon as I entered the house, I smelled something foul in the air, the smell of rotting meat. The inside of this house looked like nobody had lived there for years. I decided to check the upstairs of this house, and once I climbed up the stairs to the top step, I saw there were 5 bedrooms adjacent to each other. I checked out the one to my right, which was nothing special, just a bed and a closet. I checked out the rest of the bedrooms and found nothing. Great, I thought to myself, this was a complete waste of my time. Just as I was about to leave though, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It startled me. I knew I was caught red-handed, but just as I could say anything, I saw it was a woman, and she put her hand over my mouth and shushed me. I slowly backed away and then sprinted back to my house. As I did, I heard the blood-curdling scream of the woman telling me to come back. I got back to my house and decided not to do anything. At 3 a.m., I woke up to sounds outside my window. I looked out and saw the same woman staring back at me with a wide smile that ran across her face. Her crazed eyes stared back at me on the other side of the glass. I fell back in shock and then dialed 911. Cops were at my location within minutes. I had told them what happened, and they went to the house across the street. They searched it and found nothing. They told me there were no signs of anyone there since the horrifying murder that had took place in that very house. I was shocked. I hadn't heard of anything happening at all in that house, as it was an ongoing investigation. The cops were not able to give me the information I so desperately wanted to know. The next day, I did some research, and what I found made me sick. On December 31st,
A mother and her son were brutally murdered inside that very house. December 31st, I linked everything together and stared at myself in the mirror in pure horror. The events that took place to this day have changed me forever. In the next 8 months, I quit my job and had to get therapy for the rest of the year. I would wake up at late hours of the night to see the woman's crazed smiles staring back at me, and I would scream in pure horror. It's been a year since this traumatizing experience, and I'm still recovering.
This happened back on Christmas morning when I was a kid, probably around 10 years old. I lived with my parents and siblings in a house that had a main floor and then a basement as well. I was the youngest child in the family, with my older brother being 13 at the time and my older sister being 16. They each had their own bedrooms on the main level, as well as my parents. I, on the other hand, had my bedroom in the basement, which had positives and negatives to it. The basement was finished and pretty nice, so I got the most privacy, but it also got really cold down there sometimes, and it was just really far away from everything. I would walk through the basement living room area and another room that was pretty much just storage, and then I would get to the stairs. So obviously, being a 10-year-old kid, I was very excited for Christmas to arrive. I had been looking forward to it for a while. When it was Christmas morning, I remember that I woke up at probably 6 something in the morning. After waking, I got out of bed, and I was going to go upstairs and wake everybody up. After leaving my bedroom, I literally ran through the rest of the basement to the stairs. As I was running though, I was sure that I saw somebody in the storage room to my right that I would always pass by. However, I didn't look over and wasn't sure who it was. I just assumed it to either be my older brother or my father most likely. So when I got upstairs, I saw that my brother and sister were already up. They were near the Christmas tree in the living room, watching TV and looking at the tons of presents that were under the tree. I asked them if our parents were up yet, and they said no, so I went down the hallway to their bedroom to wake them. When I got into their bedroom, I woke them up, and I realized that if both my parents were in their room and my siblings were up, then who was it exactly who I had seen downstairs? This made no sense to me. I went over to my brother in the living room and told him that I thought I saw somebody downstairs. He said it was probably just our father, but I told him how it was impossible because I had just seen the guy when I went upstairs. Now that everybody in the family was awake and in the living room, I was very curious, so I decided to go back downstairs. At this point, I was thinking that maybe I was just imagining things. All the lights were off downstairs, so you couldn't really see that great anyways. Maybe I had seen a large box and mistook it for a person or something. I wanted to clear my mind, so I went back down the stairs by myself. I was like 90% sure that it was nothing. When I got downstairs, at first I heard and saw nothing. Then I got to the storage room. There were quite a few boxes and things like that in there. It was kind of cluttered. However, within a few seconds, I saw this man walk out from around the corner. It was a homeless-looking guy. He had longer hair, a long beard, and was wearing baggy clothes. As soon as I saw him, I took off running back up the stairs. I got back up and screamed that there was a man in the basement. Everyone started freaking out. There was a mix of people not believing and others confused. Within moments, though, we all heard movement downstairs. Not knowing if the guy was dangerous or not, we all went into my parents' bedroom, except for my dad. He went over to the top of the stairs and started yelling at the guy to leave and stuff. Obviously, we called the police as well. The next thing I remember was that my dad came back into the room and said that the man was gone. Apparently, the man had entered the house through a window that led to the basement sometime in the night. He had left through that same window and ran in the direction of a neighbor's. The police got there and ended up locating the man hiding behind the neighbor's house across the street. It was a huge relief knowing that he was caught, but I was extremely creeped out also knowing that I slept the entire night with a man breaking in and being in the next room over from me. That was the craziest thing to ever happen on Christmas when I was a kid.
I currently live in a smaller town. It's pretty removed, but still has a lot of good shopping and eating options and public spaces. We even have a few breweries and bars now. It's a newly hip place, with farming on the outskirts so I can get my eggs and veggies fresh from the source. The pandemic really hurt business locally though, and pretty much the only regular delivery options were Walmart and Amazon for a minute.
I was stoked when much later more local options popped up on various apps. However, at the time, for main necessities and grocery items, there really wasn't any options besides a store delivery from the Walmart a town over. This meant a lot of people we didn't know well popping through, and it drove some of the older folks crazy, all over the neighborhood talking about cars and people they didn't recognize. I embraced it. It made my life easier. At this point, I lived with my teenage son, and my then boyfriend was staying to be near his elderly parents. We lived in a tiny space, and I felt a little cramped with the guys always around. So occasionally I'd send them off on an errand, or they'd visit my boyfriend's parents to give some extra space for me to work on things or just enjoy being alone. One of those days, I got a delivery. I recognized the guy, said hi, and tipped him well, and then went about with my life. An hour later, he was back at my door. He was creepy, because I have steps in front of my door but no porch. He would knock and stand beside the steps where I couldn't see him through the eye hole, but I could see him through the window he was next to. I asked him through the window if I could help him. He kept trying to knock and look for where my voice was coming from before he finally answered and told me that he forgot a bag in the delivery. I confirmed I got it all and thanked him. He left. I didn't want to open the door again after he noticed I was alone. I got new neighbors directly in the unit across from me, and they had a Ring camera. She reached out to me one day and told me somebody had come by knocking and had sat on my steps for about half an hour when nobody was home. I watched the video, and it looked like the same delivery guy. He had been hanging around at 8 p.m., and I didn't have any other orders either. I reached out to Walmart, and they were totally unhelpful. They told me they'd be making sure he didn't deliver anything to me in the future, but they wouldn't give me any information I could pass on to security or the police in case anything further happened. I wanted to at least file a report with my security in case anything happened again because it was weird. I had the feeling it would escalate, and it did. I didn't want to be home alone anymore. I didn't order delivery, and I just tried to cover my bases. However, my neighbor did order a delivery, and somehow it came through with that guy again. I watched him drop it off, and then saw him come over and stand right in front of my stairs looking around my door and living room windows. He stood there for like 5 minutes until my neighbor opened the door to get her groceries, and I told her that's the guy from the Ring camera. She contacted Walmart too, and asked that he doesn't deliver her anything anymore either. A few weeks went by, and Christmas was around the corner. I had ordered a few items from Amazon, and they were all arriving together. I knew they were on my front steps. I saw a different delivery guy who dropped them off, knocked, and walked away. My boyfriend was on the couch with his headphones on working, and I was cooking dinner. I figured I'd grab the packages in a moment, as they were fine on my front steps for the time being, and there was a camera out there if anything happens. I finished plating and brought the food in, and I was sitting the plates down. The front doorknob, which wasn't locked, gave a tiny turn. The deadbolt was still latched, but the knob wasn't, and I could hear it. My boyfriend couldn't because of his headphones, so I alerted him and pointed it out. My boyfriend was completely oblivious to these type of things, and he said I must be hearing things, so he got up and he ripped the door open to prove it. To his surprise, there was that same creepy delivery guy crouched up against the wall under the window, his hand still on the knob trying to turn it silently. He looked mortified to see a man opening the door, and when my son came up also to the doorway, he looked really confused. He asked for me by name. He must have known my name from the deliveries because he used the name I have on my account, which isn't the name everyone knows me by. My boyfriend asked what he needed, and the guy reached down and picked up the Amazon box and said, "Delivery," and handed it to us and then left. It was really strange. I explained to my boyfriend that he was not delivering those boxes and they were already there. We took the footage to the police, and I tried to reach out to Walmart. The police told me they reached out to Walmart and just got a bunch of clueless basic customer service agents with no idea how to proceed, and if he came back, I needed to call them so they could get to him in person. I was really scared though. I was glad that I wasn't in the house alone now, but I felt like he might take more drastic measures knowing that too. There's one window at the side of my house that faces the front lawn, but it's blocked off by a large entertainment system. It's the only blocked window I have, and besides my bedroom window, it's the only one that's not visible from the Ring camera. But all my windows are always locked overnight. The next morning when I was leaving for work, the window screens were both removed and placed beneath the windows. There were handprints smudged all over the glass. There were no clear footprints, just deep muddy sloshes, as our sprinkler system hits that pretty good at night. I didn't even bother contacting Walmart again. They were totally useless. The last thing to happen was when my boyfriend was coming over late one night. He worked that night and didn't come home until around 3 a.m. I knew he was coming, but I was woken up by a loud fighting outside. He had pulled into the parking lot, and this guy was underneath my car. He scrambled under the car when he was pulling in. My boyfriend pretended like he hadn't seen him, and watched him slide out and try to hide behind the parked cars, but it looked like he had been messing with my car. My boyfriend ended up pinning him against the ground, and I called the police. There was an air tag taped under my car, so he was trying to track me away from my house and get me alone. The guy was arrested with other charges too. I didn't hear anything else from it. I gave statements and incident report numbers and was told that I might need to testify, but it's never happened. I haven't had any incidents since then though. This is a really bizarre story from a few years ago. I worked at an office building for my job in downtown of the city. I liked my job a lot. It paid well and most of the people working there were good. We had a work Christmas party and gift exchange scheduled for one night. It was going to be at a room on the first floor of the office building. The building I worked in was very nice with many floors, and it had some really good spaces for parties and stuff. So I procrastinated getting a gift for the party and forgot all about it. I got home from work only to realize that the party was that night. I had forgotten about it. I lived in an apartment about 15 minutes from work outside of the city. Realizing that I had to go to the party, I left early and then stopped at Target to get a gift. I walked around the store for a while having no idea what to buy. I don't even remember what I ended up getting, something like a JBL speaker or something. This was not a cheap gift exchange where the gifts were actually supposed to be decently nice. I think it was $50 minimum or something like that. So I was inside of Target doing the shopping for like 20 minutes. I walked all around the store, I remember. When I was there, it seemed fine, not that busy or anything. I left, went to my car, and drove back to work. By this time, I parked on the side of the street in the city because it was free at that hour and there were open spaces. I could park in a garage for work, but it took longer and I was lazy and saw a spot on the street that was open. I then walked inside and went into the party. There was everyone from our department at work and a few other people as well. Overall, there was probably about 30 people there. I obviously knew some of the people better than others, but I knew pretty much everyone there. However, not long into being there, I noticed that there was a woman sitting on a couch in the corner. She was kind of by herself and not talking to anyone, but I noticed that she was on her phone. I didn't know who she was and had never seen her at work or anything. I didn't think much of it other than slightly wondering who she was, but I do remember noticing her looking at me a couple of times, but she never got up from the couch or talked to anyone. I was mostly just talking to the people from my office who I interacted with the most. We were getting ready to do the gift exchange, some type of random thing where you don't know who gets your gift. Anyways, when I went to get some more fruit punch, the one mysterious woman approached me. She came up to me and said hi. I said hi to her and introduced myself. This woman seemed odd right away. She told me that she did not work there. She said that she had to admit that she saw me at Target and followed me there. I was speechless. Really, I was wondering if she was joking or if this is really what happened. I don't even remember what I said. She laughed and acted like that was not creepy at all to follow someone. She said that she didn't have the courage to talk to me in the store, but didn't want to let me get away. I was thinking, okay, does this woman think I'm attractive or something? This isn't some Hallmark movie. It's kind of weird to follow someone that far. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. She started asking me questions, like if this was where I worked, and she said that it looked really fancy. Now, this woman was decently attractive, and if I had met her in a normal setting, I might have wanted to go out with her, and I was single as well. However, it was just a big turnoff to me that she followed me like that. Plus, the way she was talking didn't seem very genuine. I don't know how else to explain it. But I answered her questions and asked her a couple of basic questions too. I was trying to figure out why this lady would follow me. Then she said that we should leave the party and go to a bar nearby. She said that she knew just the spot for us to go and emphasized that we could walk there. My Christmas work party had only been going on for like 30 minutes. I didn't want to leave this early with some random chick. I told her I couldn't do that, and I didn't want to anyways, but she was insisting. Then she tried to compromise. She said that maybe in a little bit we could go there. I said no, I didn't want to. She then said that she would check back with me in a few minutes, whatever that meant. This woman was really creeping me out now. She walked away and went back over to the couch and just sat there like before and went on her phone, seemingly texting. I went over and found a friend from work and told him about the situation. He didn't believe me and clearly was just as confused by it as I was. I tried to stay away from that woman and spent my time at the other end of the large room. About a half hour later, though, I saw her talking to another guy who worked in the building. I watched their conversation for a few seconds from a long ways away. I saw her motioning the same way she did when she told me to go to whatever bar she wanted to go to. It looked as though she was trying to get this guy to go there too, but he seemed to say no to her as well. Like 5 minutes later, out of nowhere, I saw her come up to me. She asked me if I changed my mind, and I said no, I was staying at the party. She said okay, and then I saw her turn around and walk away really fast. This time, though, she left. I saw her go out the door into the stairwell, but I was curious to see where she was going. I wanted to make sure she was leaving. If she followed me there, I was at least going to make sure that she was actually leaving the building and not going upstairs or something, because the stairwell went up to other floors where nobody was supposed to go other than employees. So I saw her walk out the doors, and then I walked out a short time after her. She did leave the building, and I quickly went up to the second floor and watched from the window there. I saw her walk down the sidewalk a short ways and then get into the passenger's door of a car parked on the street. The car immediately made a really sharp U-turn and then turned around to go back the other way. When it passed, I saw a man was driving and there was another guy in the back seat with the woman. Based on the fact that it was an older, large SUV and there were multiple people inside of it other than the woman, I didn't think that it was an Uber. I rejoined the party and told a few people about the weird encounter. Later on, I went back home that night, and I couldn't stop thinking about the weird situation. It is my suspicion that the woman was up to no good. I mean, I don't consider myself ugly, but no woman has ever come up to me and told me that she liked me or anything, and certainly nobody ever followed me. But I thought about it after, and if this woman did actually like me, why wouldn't she ask me for my number? We never exchanged numbers or any information other than first names, which I forgot what hers was. And then when she got in the car with the guys, she seemed to know them. I think she wanted to set me up to get robbed by those guys or something, probably on the way to that bar. She even tried to get my coworker too. Overall, maybe I am just being paranoid. Maybe she did like me and had a bad ways of going about it. But I don't think it's right to follow people like that. That's creepy.
A couple of years back, I had to do some last-minute Christmas shopping, so I went to Target. I was 18 at the time, and this was the night before Christmas Eve. You see, every Christmas, my family has a bunch of people over at our house. My grandparents, some aunts and uncles, and cousins all go to my parents' house. Almost everyone gets presents for basically everyone else, so it's a lot of fun. Now, I had gone Christmas shopping several times since Thanksgiving to that point, and I had almost everybody checked off my list. The last one was the hardest person for me to shop for personally. That was my cousin Josie. She was I think 14 at the time, and I just simply forgot to get her something. Plus, being a guy, I didn't really know what kind of gifts teenage girls like. So after my parents asked me if I had made sure I had gifts for everyone, I remembered her. I headed down to the local Target, which was just down the road like 5 minutes away. I went inside, and it was not as busy as I expected. I don't recall the exact time, but it was maybe like 8 p.m. or so. It was mostly quiet, and I walked in and looked around. I didn't really know what I was looking for though. I ended up just walking around the store for like 10 minutes, hoping that something would jump out at me. Eventually though, I ended up settling on just a gift card, and then I checked out and I left the store. I had parked pretty close to the store, and almost right after walking out the doors, I noticed a man standing around by my car. It was a guy who looked fairly young, maybe 6 feet tall, and had short dark hair. He was just standing around right by my car, and I didn't know what he was doing. When I got closer though, the man started to approach me. Then he asked me if I could give him a ride. I walked past him and said no, I could not. I obviously did not want to give a ride to some random stranger that I had never met before. The man was persistent though. He walked alongside me and then cut in front. He said that he needed a ride badly and it was not that far. Nothing that he said was going to change my mind though. I told him that I could not give him a ride. He was blocking my way of getting in my car though, and I was worried that he was not going to let me in. I asked him to move and said that I was in a hurry and I was sorry, but I just couldn't do it. This seemed to work at first. The man walked around the front of my car and was no longer blocking me from getting in. He said that he understood and he was sorry for bothering me. I told him it was fine and to have a good night. Then I unlocked my car and reached for the door. By now, the man had walked around to the other side of my car, and it appeared like he was headed to maybe go inside Target. But like right after I hit the unlock button, the man swung around to the passenger side door and opened it. Then he started to go inside of my car. I had begun opening the driver's door, but I no longer went inside of it. Instead, I backed up and then closed the door. When this happened, the man then left the car as well and quickly started walking around it, headed towards me. In an instant, just out of reaction, I turned and just started running away. I sprinted through the Target parking lot. Unfortunately, the man was chasing me away from the Target and not towards it. So when I was running, I was going farther away. I kept going and I ended up running through the entire parking lot and then into a nearby bank parking lot which bordered the Target property. The man was still chasing after me. The bank was closed, so I turned and ran across a quiet street where there was a strip mall way in front of the Target. I ran to a restaurant and saw that it was open, and then I went inside of it. Thankfully, the man did not follow me into the restaurant. When I was there, I waited inside and I called the police. I reported what happened, and I didn't leave the restaurant until the cops got there. They went back to my car with me, and the passenger's door was still open. However, the man was gone. He was nowhere in sight, and the police started to look around for him. I was able to go home at that point. That made for a very memorable Christmas shopping experience.
This is something that happened back when I was in high school. I was living at home with my parents and my 2 siblings. For Christmas, we would usually get about 2 weeks off from school, which was always nice. On this year, everybody in my family had all gone shopping and got gifts for each other. I had some things for people that I was excited to give them. I hid them under my bed so that no one would know what I got for them. As Christmas Day approached, I wanted to wrap my presents for my family members, and I guess I was the first to do so. I could not find the gift wrap, and my mom told me that it was still up in the attic. So I went over to the hallway upstairs, and then opened the attic door, which we did not use much. I then went up the stairs to find the gift wrap, but when I first got up there in the attic, I saw all the old boxes and stuff. The attic space was fairly large, and filled with boxes of old stuff that we never used. So I went up there and could not find the gift wrap, so I moved around a bit up there and moved some more stuff. The lighting up there was also pretty bad, with just one dimly lit light. I moved around and got towards one end, and then finally found the gift wrap. It was in a large box, and there was tons of it. I took a few rolls and picked them up, but just as I did, I heard another noise. It was the sound of a box moving from the other end of the attic. I looked over, but did not see anything other than a large box, which seemed to be the one that had moved. But it couldn't move on its own. I was instantly paranoid. I started quickly walking back towards the stairs to go back down. Before I got there, though, I saw the box move again, and then a man started to come out from behind it. It was a random guy who I had never seen before. He looked fairly young, and when I saw him, it made me stop. Because where he was and the box was, I had to kind of go past it to go downstairs. Then I moved back to the opposite end of the attic where I had been before. Neither me or the suspicious man said anything. As I was back there, I watched the man to see what he would do. After he came out from behind the box, he turned and started to walk down the stairs. I stayed where I was. Once he had gone down from there, he opened the attic door and left. I finally moved again and went down the stairs after the guy, but I moved very carefully. I did not know where he was or if someone else in my family would see him. When I made it out of the attic, though, I didn't see the guy. I carefully started to walk down the hallway to go back downstairs to the main floor. I was going to find my parents and tell them. I didn't know where the man was, but I thought that probably he had gone into one of the upstairs bedrooms to hide or something. However, as I was walking down the stairs to go to the main floor, I heard the back door to the house quietly opening. I didn't know who it was still. When I got to the main floor, I found my parents. My dad was in his office and my mom was in the living room. The back door opening had been the man from the attic leaving. I told my parents, and they never saw him. They assumed the back door opening was one of us. After locking all the doors, obviously, we went upstairs and looked in the attic. There were several food wrappers, water bottles, and some Coors Lights, as well as a blanket that had been taken out of one of the boxes. It appeared as though the man was living in the attic, but it did not appear as though he had been there for long, maybe a few days. We called the police and reported it. I have no idea when exactly or how exactly the man got in. With all of us living there and coming and going, it's possible that a door was left unlocked for a period of time. I just don't know how he got all the way up there without anybody noticing. We never really used the attic, but we were in the rest of the house all the time. I'm just glad that the man left and didn't do any harm.
I just want to start off by saying that Christmas is my favorite holiday. But every year, I remember what happened to my family and I on Christmas years ago. I was 12 years old at the time, and I went to my cousin's house with my family to celebrate. On Christmas Eve, my family and I decided to stay the night at my cousin's house because our house was sort of far away. There were guest bedrooms for my family and I to sleep in, but I woke up at about 4 a.m. When I did, I heard noises downstairs, so I decided to go check it out. I went downstairs, and when I did, I saw someone dressed as Santa Claus. I saw him looking around in the kitchen and looking for gifts under the Christmas tree. There wasn't that many Christmas presents left because my family and I had opened most of them, but there were still a few left under the Christmas tree. I went back upstairs and woke up my dad. He came downstairs with me, but there was no one inside the house. My dad told me I had just had a bad dream. I decided to go back to sleep, and in the morning when everyone was up, we were getting ready to eat breakfast. My uncle went in the basement to go get some drinks, when he said he saw the basement window was shattered and it looked like someone had climbed in. My uncle called the cops, and when the cops came, they couldn't find any other evidence other than the broken window. My whole family was scared. My uncle and dad checked the whole house to make sure nothing was stolen. After a while, my uncle and dad came running downstairs and came into the kitchen where we all were and said they heard something in the attic. They went back upstairs to check it out, and shortly after that, they started yelling because they saw the man that I had seen dressed as Santa Claus hiding behind a bunch of boxes. They called the police once again, and all of us went outside to wait for the cops to arrive. When the police came, the officers went running inside and pulled the man out of the attic. They found that he had a knife and tape in his pockets. The officer said it wasn't just him breaking into our house, but there had been multiple reports of someone dressed as Santa Claus walking near people's houses in the area, and we were the fourth call. The officers also told us that these
This is something that happened when I was Christmas shopping a couple of years ago. It was one of the final weekends before Christmas, and I had a lot of things to buy. I went shopping all by myself and went to a very large mall that was sort of close to where I live. When I got there, it was extremely busy and remained that way the entire time. Just about everywhere that I went inside, I had to wait in line to check out. I was there for several hours, but eventually was able to get just about everything that I wanted. It was mostly gifts for friends and family. When I was finally done shopping, I left the mall and drove home. Everything seemed to have gone well. Now, when I was on the way home and probably about halfway back, my cell phone started to ring. I looked and did not recognize the number, so I didn't answer it. But just a short time later, I saw that whoever had called me left a voicemail. I got curious, so I decided to play it right then and there. When I did, I heard a man's voice speaking. The way he spoke was sort of creepy and unsettling. He told me that he was driving behind me right now and that I should have answered the phone. I looked behind me. I was on the highway and there were a lot of other cars, plus it was dark out. There was a car directly behind me, but I couldn't tell how long it had been back there. I just kept going back on my way home. I was very suspicious and a little nervous, but thought that maybe it could just be a dumb joke. When I turned off the highway to a slightly quieter road, the car behind me did as well. Now I was less than 10 minutes from my house. I kept driving, and when I made the next turn, the car followed. In this kind of a situation, I knew you were supposed to drive to the police if you're being followed. So I took out my phone and asked Siri to direct me to the nearest police station. Soon I had a route, and I followed it. It would only take about 5 minutes to get there. But before I even made it to the street where the police station was on, I noticed that the car stopped following me. I pulled into the police station anyways, but didn't get out of my car. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, making sure that the car didn't come in after me and that it was gone. Then I finally went back on the road and went home. For the rest of my drive, I did not notice the car directly behind me or anything. There were a decent number of other cars on the road, but it wasn't all that busy. Eventually, I got back to my house and pulled in.
My street was usually pretty quiet, but as soon as I parked my car in the driveway, my phone started to ring again. I jumped when I heard it. When I looked, it was the same number as before. I decided to answer it. When I did, I heard the same man's voice speak. He said, "You shouldn't have gone to the police station. You should have just went home. I know where you live." This really freaked me out, but just then, things got worse. I suddenly heard a car approaching and saw headlights entering my street. I turned and ran for my house as fast as possible. I got to the door and unlocked it just as the car reached my driveway. It pulled in and parked behind my car, and I made it inside of my house. I locked the door behind me. I took out my phone and called the police. Meanwhile, after parking in my driveway, I saw a man get out and start to walk to my door. I ran back into the living room, which is away from the door. The man then knocked on my front door, and then he tried to open it. After that, he stayed on the front step, just standing there. I really wonder if that guy was crazy. He called me again, but I didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail, and he did not leave a message. The good part is that he did not attempt to break in. He just stood there, right outside of my front door, the entire time. Finally, the police got there. They talked to the man and were able to get him to leave, as well as gave him a citation. I hoped that would be enough, though. It was certainly one of the scariest situations in my life. That man was very sneaky. I really don't know how he got my phone number or knew where I lived. I think he waited for me around the corner of the police station or something. Then he kept a distance so I didn't notice him. It was dark out, so I couldn't see all the other cars very well. Either way, whatever he did, it blows my mind he was able to do it. The good news is that I haven't seen him since.
This is the craziest experience that I ever had shopping on Black Friday. For many years, starting in the 2000s, it became a tradition for me to go shopping on Black Friday. It started when I was a kid going with my mom, and it would be a mother-daughter shopping day. The sales seemed to get crazier and crazier, and we would go earlier and earlier. Then I remembered that they started opening stores on Thanksgiving Day. We never did that until 2014 when I wanted to go shopping that night. I wanted to go by myself because I wanted to get a Christmas gift for my mom. There was some other stuff that I wanted to get as well, but that was the main reason. So that Thanksgiving, I left my parents' house to go to Target, which was opening at 6 p.m. I drove there and arrived a little bit after 6, maybe 6:15. I didn't think there was a need to wait in line or to get there right at 6 o'clock. If I didn't get something because of that little bit of time, then I didn't care too much. However, the store was much crazier than I expected. The parking lot was almost completely full, but when I got in the store, it was way worse. There were people everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It was basically a giant mob of people every direction that you looked. Whether you went left, right, forward, or back, you were going to be running into someone. It was impossible to go to any part of the store with any kind of speed. You could only go at the pace of the mob. It was like being in a wave in the ocean. The herd of people would just take you along. If you wanted to go against it, it would be nearly impossible. I got swept up by the mob and taken towards electronics, which is where I was going anyways. But that's where everybody else was going too. Eventually, I made it there and tried to separate myself from the giant crowd of people. I fought my way out of it to where it was slightly less busy. I started fighting my way to look for the things that I wanted. I was looking around the electronics area, having a hard time finding things, probably because of how many people there were. After I was over there for maybe 10 minutes, I remember that this Target employee approached me. He asked if he could help me, and I said I didn't know because it was so busy. I told him what I was trying to find, and I remember that he was struggling to hear me because of how crazy it was. It was pretty loud. I remember that he told me to follow him, and he started walking along the edge of the store along the wall. I followed him, and he quickly went through these 2 swinging doors that went into the employees only area. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to follow him there, but he waved me in. I went in there, and it was crazy to see how different it was back there. We were in this back room with a bunch of high shelves and concrete floors. It was much quieter. The guy said that it was easier to talk back there, and it was. He asked me again what I was looking for, and I told him. He said that he was going to help me out, and said that they might have a few in the back. Then he started walking down the narrow walkway, and I followed him. I was wondering why I was seemingly getting special treatment, and it seemed sort of strange. We walked down there, and then took a left to this sort of back aisle. I saw him take out his cell phone as he was walking, and he started talking into it, but I couldn't really hear him. He was talking pretty quiet. Then we got to the end of that aisle there. At the back of it was a wall, and on that wall was a door leading to outside. There were a bunch of random boxes and stuff lying around as well. The man then stood there, and we were both just standing there for a few seconds. I was starting to get confused. The guy took out his phone and was looking at it. This was starting to seem wrong, but I didn't really know what to do. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a voice behind us. I looked back and saw another Target employee. He said, "Who are you guys and what are you doing back here?" I was really confused. Then I heard the door open behind me. I looked and saw the guy who had been helping me open the door for the back room to go outside. He sprinted out, and before the door swung shut, I saw him jump into the back seat of this car. Then the car screeched away and the door slowly closed. I turned back around super confused, and the Target employee asked me what I was doing back there and who that guy was. I told him what happened. The guy told me that the other guy did not work at Target. He was dressed as an employee, but was impersonating one. The man told me that he saw that his uniform was off and saw him going into the back room with me. That's why he went in to confront us. Then we went back out to the crazy area of Target. I was really weirded out by the whole thing and left and went back to my parents. I couldn't stop thinking about how crazy that was. When I thought about it more, I realized the man might have been trying to kidnap me or something. Maybe he was communicating on his phone with the people who were driving the car, and he was planning to take me out the door and shove me into the car and then drive away. He certainly wasn't actually trying to help me. I'm glad that the other Target worker was there and noticed us. I worked at Target on Christmas Eve back many years ago now. We closed a little bit early on Christmas Eve from what I remember. I think we were open until maybe 7 p.m. or something like that. I had to work pretty much until close as a cashier, and this was back when I was about 18 years old. Every year my family would go to my grandparents' house on Christmas Eve and hang out, but unfortunately I wouldn't be able to go that year because I had to work at Target. I was disappointed about it. I was getting paid extra money, so I guess that made things a little bit better. That day at Target started out really busy and then got slower and slower. At first, there were tons of customers and I was having a lot of people in my checkout line. At probably 3 p.m. or so, things started to really quiet down. Then by 5 or 6, there was basically nobody there. Soon enough, we closed and I was able to go home. I left Target and walked out to my car in the parking lot. But when I drove home, I was surprisingly followed. So I remember that as I was walking to my car, it was in the back corner of the parking lot. The parking lot was very large, but it had also snowed, so there were piles of snow around and stuff. It had been really busy when I got there, so I was parked in the back corner far away. My car was one of the only ones there when I left, and it was dark out when I was leaving as well. As I approached my car, I remember seeing a running car not far away. Its lights were on, and I thought nothing of it though, as I could not see who the driver was in the vehicle. I figured it was just somebody who was going to leave or whatever. I didn't really give it much thought at all. By the time I got to my car, I left, and the other car was still there. I did notice that right after I left though, this car also left. This was just because we were the only cars in that area of the parking lot, and this is a detail that I probably would have forgot had the car not followed me all the way home. I think we lived about 10 minutes away from the Target. You would take a few roads that were not that busy, and most of the roads did not have much traffic on them at this hour anyways, with it being Christmas Eve. So I noticed the headlights driving behind me, which went all the way home. I didn't really care that much. We lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood, but there was kind of a lot of houses in it, so I just assumed that whoever was driving this car behind me must also live around there, although I did find it suspicious. Maybe it was because I was tired from work and lazy, or maybe it was because it was cold outside or I was young, but I never really thought to try to lose the car or drive to a police station or do anything that I should have. I just went straight back home. When I pulled into the driveway to our house, the car behind me did not. It continued down the street, which made me breathe a sigh of relief. I figured that it was just a neighbor or someone going to a neighbor's house. So I got out of the car and went inside. I was home alone now because my parents and brother were still at my grandparents', but they would be leaving to come home soon. So I got inside and then was just hanging out in the living room of the house. Probably 10 minutes after getting back, I thought I heard the sound of the front door starting to open, but it did not open from it being locked. I assumed that it was just my parents returning home. However, nobody entered the house or unlocked the door for the next minute or so. So I got up and went over to the front window to look outside. When I did not see anybody, so that made me suspicious and wonder what it was that I heard. I was so sure that it was the sound of someone trying to open the doorknob to the front door, but I was starting to second guess myself. Maybe I had just heard the wind. I started walking back to the living room. That's when I heard the same sound again as before, except this time it was coming from the back door to the house, which was also locked. That's when panic set in. I knew that somebody was there, and I also knew that it wouldn't be my parents. I didn't hear any noises for a little while after that. I had stayed where I was in the living room, but finally, after not hearing anything for a while, I decided to go and see. I walked to the back of the house and looked out of a window. Nobody was there either. Once more, I went back to the living room, hoping that whoever had tried entering the house was gone now. But now I was super creeped out. Probably a minute or two later, there was a knock at the front door. I was way too scared to get up at first. They knocked again, and I ignored it. Finally, though, after not hearing a knock for the next few minutes, I got up. I went over to the front door and just barely saw a man walking at the very end of our driveway. I didn't get a good look at his face or anything because he was walking down the driveway and I only saw his back, and he was quickly out of my sight and down the street. I continued watching from the front window, though. We didn't have much of a view of the street or anything other than what was directly in front of the house. I would say maybe 1 minute later I heard a car approaching down the street. Then the car drove down the street coming from the direction that the man had walked. It went past our house and down the street out of my sight. It looked like the same car that had followed me home. I was paranoid and called my parents after that. They were on their way home, thankfully. When they got back, we looked around the house and saw some footprints in the snow, but that was it. When I worked at Target after that, I never saw the car again or anything suspicious. I still wonder who that was that followed me and tried entering our house. It's a creepy thing to think about, and I wish I would have got a better look at who did it, but I'm really glad that he didn't get in. Last year, I went to a Christmas party with some friends. I have a pretty large friend group that I've had for years. Most of us live in the same general area, and Jim and Vanessa, who recently got married, live in a really nice apartment building. They're part of the friend group, and they decided to host the Christmas party last year in the recreation room of their apartment building. You can rent out the room, and it's very nice and also large. There's a kitchen and dining room and stuff, so it's popular for parties of all kinds. So I went to the party, and there was probably 30 to 40 people that wound up coming. So many that I didn't even know all of them that well, but I at least recognized everybody, and most of them I did know very well. We talked, had food, drank, and had a very good time. I remember, though, there was this one woman who I did not recognize at all. She was the only person at the party where I had no idea who she was. I thought maybe she was somebody's girlfriend who had just recently started dating or something, but she didn't really seem to be with anyone. I would see her on and off during the party. I never got around to saying hi to her or having a conversation and asking who she was or anything, though. Eventually, people started to leave the party. I would say that there were maybe 15 or 20 people still there when I left, so a good amount. When I was leaving, I remember noticing the woman sitting by herself, sort of in the corner of the room. After I left, I walked out of the apartment into my car. Then I started to drive back to my own apartment, which was like 10 minutes away. Well, the strangest thing happened. That very same woman ended up following me home. I hadn't noticed anything at all until I pulled up to a red light and was like maybe 2 minutes from my place. When I stopped, I just casually looked in my mirror at the car behind me. I saw that in the driver's seat, it looked like the same woman. I didn't know what to make of this, but from that point on, I paid attention to her driving. She made all the same turns as me. It was very confusing. Soon, she was turning into my apartment complex along with me. I was pretty confident that she did not live in my building or anything. I had never seen her at all before. So I drove around the parking lot with her still behind me. I parked my car in the space that I usually did. The woman drove a little ways past, and then I saw her parking in an open space a ways away. I got out of my car and started walking for the door. I heard a car door open and close and glanced over to see the woman then walking in my direction. I went faster, and I made it inside a good time before she would reach the door. After getting in, I went up a flight of stairs and then looked out of a window outside. The woman was standing near the door, indicating that she did not have a key to get in. Then I went to my apartment. I texted a few friends about it, and I put in the group chat asking who the woman was. Well, nobody had any idea. Everybody just kind of assumed that someone else knew her, but it turns out not a single person at the party knew who she was, and then she ended up following me home. After that, I haven't seen her since. The next time I left my apartment, she was gone, and so was her car. I'm still very confused about it. This happened back when I was a kid. I was a 10-year-old girl at the time going Christmas shopping with my mom. Each year, I always looked forward to Christmas and everything that came with it. It was always fun to go shopping at the stores and malls. I got money back then from doing chores and also birthdays and stuff. The year before this story, I actually bought Christmas presents with my own money for the first time ever, and it was a lot of fun. Of course, I could only get people really small and cheap gifts because I didn't have much, but it made me feel like an adult to be able to shop for people on my own like that. One evening, I went to the mall with my mom. We were doing a bit of Christmas shopping. My dad was at basketball practice with my brother, so I brought all my money and was planning to get presents for everyone. We went to the local mall, which was pretty large and had a bunch of different stores. My mom and I shopped around the mall a little, and then we decided to split up for an hour. We had done this the previous year, and it went fine. I felt old enough to navigate the mall by myself and never felt in any danger. I knew not to talk to strangers and stuff, and overall we lived in a city that was pretty safe generally. The mall was really busy on this night, and when we split up, I went off to find a gift for my mom. I remember that I went to a couple of stores. However, I sensed a suspicious man. This was because when I was at a store, he came up to me out of nowhere. The guy must have seen that I was by myself, and I remember he asked me if I was shopping alone. I said yes, not really thinking it through, because in the moment, I was. He didn't say anything else though, he just kind of walked away. But as I went around the store looking at stuff, I didn't pay attention to the guy. However, I did notice I walked past him when I left, and when I turned the corner, I saw him leaving too. It didn't raise my suspicions until I walked into another store, and he was there as well. This was another small store, the kind you see lots of in malls that sell little things. As I shopped, I looked around and the guy was standing in the same place like the entire time. I didn't get anything there either and left. Once more, the man left a little time after me. By now, I was getting kind of worried. I thought about going back to find my mom right then and there, but we had agreed on a spot to meet in an hour and it had only been like 20 minutes. Plus, I didn't have a cell phone. This was way back in the day, and the only thing I had was a watch that told the time. I went to yet another store and tried to forget about the guy. I actually got something there and didn't see the man inside, but once more, when I left, I noticed him walking a ways back. By now, I knew that he was following me and I was extremely nervous. I started to walk down a random mall hallway to try to get away from him. I was walking fast and trying to blend in with the crowd of people, but it didn't work. After walking for a long ways, I kind of turned around and saw the guy still only like 20 feet behind me. Now, there were a lot of things that I could have done or should have done looking back, but in the moment I got scared and I panicked. I kept walking forward and was approaching some mall doors leading to outside. For some reason, I left the mall. I'm not sure if I thought the man wouldn't leave or if I was even thinking at all. This only made things more dangerous for me, but like I said, I panicked. I walked outside and then began to walk in the parking lot. It was dark outside and not nearly as many people around. A short time after I left, the man walked out the mall as well. I walked through the parking lot in between cars trying to lose the guy. Then I left the parking lot and walked onto a sidewalk next to a busy street. For a moment I thought that I had lost the man, but then I looked back and saw him again. I walked down that sidewalk and then crossed the busy street at a crosswalk. I walked across, which led to another shopping area that had a grocery store and a few other stores as well. I walked all the way to the grocery store, and when I was in the parking lot, the man was still there. Then I went inside. Now I was in some random grocery store across the street from the mall. I remember randomly walking around the aisles there for a while, but that's when I realized that I wasn't seeing the man anymore. I had finally lost him. That, or he just decided to stop following me for some reason. At that point, I decided to walk back to the mall. I went the entire way back and surprisingly did not see the guy at all. I got back to the mall just in time to go back and meet my mom at the agreed time and spot. When I got there, I told her about the guy. She ended up finding a security guard and then calling the cops. But the man was long gone by then. I don't think he was ever found. I wasn't able to shop by myself for a while after that, and I didn't want to either. I'm really glad that I was able to go to another busy store and that the man stopped following me. Looking back, I would do it differently though. I should not have left the mall, but I should have found a security guard or something like that, which I never thought to do in the moment.
A few years ago, we hosted Christmas at our house. It was my wife and I, and we were having about 15 to 20 family members come over. We have a somewhat large house and also a large backyard. Our house was decorated and ready for the guests on Christmas Day. Everything started out very well. Family started to arrive at roughly 11 o'clock in the morning. I was pretty busy talking to people and stuff, but maybe at about 11:30, something odd happened. One of my cousins arrived, and I went outside to greet him. As he was walking in, he told me that he thought he saw a guy in my backyard and wanted to know if I knew about him. I was confused. Nobody was going outside, and I didn't know why anybody would be in the backyard. I asked him to tell me more about it. He said that when he pulled into my driveway, he noticed a guy walking near the tree line of the woods in the backyard. He thought that it was me at first, but quickly realized that it wasn't. He took a few steps towards the backyard after getting out of his car, but the man quickly went out of sight. We both decided to go over there and look. After walking back to where he spotted the guy, we saw the footprints in the snow, but didn't see anyone. He must have been gone by then. We yelled out into the woods, asking if anybody was there. It was complete silence now, though. I really had no idea who it could be. My neighborhood is pretty quiet, and the houses are spaced out pretty good. But I didn't know what else could be done, so we both just went back inside. After going back in, I quickly forgot all about it and was busy talking to people. For hours, everything was going well. But then, as I was walking past one of the windows that looks out to the backyard, I saw the man myself. He was kind of far away, but I saw a guy walking through the edge of the tree line. This had to be the same person. I yelled for my cousin to come and see. The man in the woods then stopped and seemed to look in my direction. My cousin was walking over, but by the time he got there, the man then darted back into the woods. My cousin saw him for just a split second. He told me that it was the same guy that he had seen earlier, though. We kept watching the area, but he did not come back. I still wasn't really sure what to do about it, so we just went back to where everyone else was. I looked to the window a couple of more times, but didn't see the guy. I hoped that maybe he would leave for good. I still couldn't help but wonder what he was doing back there, though. Eventually, people left, and it was soon just my wife and I. We looked out the window several more times that night, but there was still nothing. At that point, I felt a lot better about it. The very next morning, I went outside into the backyard. Everything was fine at first, but I soon noticed something strange. The man wasn't back, but there was a new set of footprints in the snow. It was clearly from a person, and it wasn't mine. There had been a fresh layer of snow on Christmas Eve. When my cousin and I walked back there to the woods the day before, we were far away. In fact, I saw those sets of tracks. These went from the woods right to our back door. Then they appeared to go back to the woods. Could the same man have walked to our back door and tried to get in overnight? It creeped me out to think about it. For the next several days, I was very suspicious. But after that, I never saw the guy. I also didn't notice any other strange things happening. I still don't know who the man was and what he was doing.
I went shopping with my friend Jessica on Black Friday last year. I first went over to her house at around 7 a.m., and then we took her car and went to several stores. We live in a pretty busy area, and there are a lot of places to shop nearby. So when we drove to the first store, there were lots of other people there shopping. Overall, it was not too crazy though. There were no specific things that we desperately needed to get, but I wanted to get a start on my Christmas shopping. After going to several different stores, later on we both were at this one clothing store. This one was the busiest one yet, and it was a larger store. I remember that we both found a few things to get, but there was a really long line to check out. We got in the line anyways, and not long after us, this man got in line right behind. He looked sort of mysterious and kind of stood out right away. He was wearing sunglasses and a long black jacket. He also wore a black winter hat. The man just stood there, staring straight ahead. I was talking with Jessica, who was standing next to me the whole time, so I would see the man out of the corner of my vision. I soon realized that he didn't seem to have any items in his hands to buy at all either. For the most part though, I just ignored him. We ended up waiting in line for probably close to 30 minutes. The line slowly moved up until it was finally our turn to check out. After we did, we left the store. Jessica and I needed to go to another store after that, and we were there for a while. Then we were finally done shopping and went back. We went to Jessica's house, and I hung out there with her for a while before going back to my place. When I got home, it was sometime in the late afternoon to early evening. I live in a pretty typical neighborhood for the most part, and a pretty average house. I just remember that at like 10 o'clock at night, there was a knocking on my front door. I got up and walked over to the front window. I wanted to look outside before answering it, because a 10 p.m. knock on the door is a little bit unusual. When I looked, I could not believe my eyes. It was the same man who had been in line behind us at the store. He was still wearing the same exact thing, with the hat and sunglasses and everything. Obviously, I had no idea what he wanted, but I didn't want to find out either. I watched the man just stand there for a while. Then he knocked on the door again. I still didn't answer it. He then stood there for a really long time. He was probably there for at least 5 minutes. Then, finally, he walked away. I saw him go down the street and then out of my sight. A short time after that, a car drove past, which I'm guessing was his. I really don't know why the guy showed up at my house, or how he even knew where I lived. It made me wonder, though, if he had been following me all day or something. If he had been, I certainly didn't notice, and I'm hoping that I don't see him again. A few years ago, I went Christmas shopping one night by myself. For a little more details, I will also mention that I'm a female. I had already gotten some gifts for family and friends, but I wanted to complete all my shopping, and I had several things still to buy, including a gift for my husband. I ended up getting out of work a little bit early, so I decided to go shopping straight from there. First, I went to a local shopping center that had a few strip malls close to each other. I went to a couple of the stores and spent a bit of time there. After finding a couple of things, I left and walked back to my car in the parking lot. I remember that I was parked pretty much right in the middle of it. When I was about to drive away, I just remember that I noticed there was somebody in a car looking at me. I didn't think much of it, but the car was parked in the next row over and some guy was in the driver's seat just staring in my direction. Within a few seconds though, I looked away and then I drove off. After that, I ended up going to Target, which was just a couple of miles away from there. When I got there, I did some more shopping and was inside the store for a good 30 minutes at least. I got a number of different things, not all gifts for people. But anyways, I left Target and walked out to my car. When I got inside, once more I noticed somebody was looking at me. There was a car parked in a similar distance to the one before, and it looked like the same man was behind the wheel. He was looking at me like before, and that's when I thought that it was really strange. Why would he be here too? I even wondered if he had followed me or something. I wanted to leave right after noticing him, so I started my car and began to drive away. When I left the parking lot, I did not notice the man leaving or anything, so I felt a little bit better. I figured that maybe he had followed me from the strip mall to the Target without me noticing. So I just had one more stop to make after that. I was going to a nearby grocery store on the way home to get a few things for dinner. I stopped there and I parked and then went inside. I got all the things that I needed and I was in the store for maybe 10 to 15 minutes if I had to guess. After I left, I walked out to my car again. When I did, at first, I didn't see anything, but I looked around just to be safe. When I looked around, I just barely noticed the same guy was watching me yet again. He was parked in a spot that was across from mine and similar to the 2 other times, except it was not as easily visible to where I was because there were a few other cars sort of in the way. When I saw him again, I really couldn't believe it. I was very confused and had no idea what was going on, but I knew that I wanted to get out of there and just go home. So I left and drove away, very careful to watch the car to see if it would follow me. When I made it to the end of the parking lot, once more I did not notice him. He was still parked there when I left, and he quickly was out of my sight. So at that point, I drove the rest of the way home, which was under 10 minutes. I got back, parked my car in the driveway, and went inside. My husband was already home, and then I unloaded all the groceries and stuff. Just after that though, I happened to notice out a window a car pulling over to the side of the street out front. When I did, I realized that it was the same car.
That meant the same man was behind the wheel. I had no idea how he found me. I told my husband about what happened and how the car was there. I suggested calling the police, but my husband had other ideas. As soon as he got wind of it, he went over to the closet by the door and he took out his baseball bat. Then he walked out the front door and was going straight for the car. When he made it almost halfway through the yard, the car quickly drove away, screeching the tires in the process. When my husband came back inside, he said that if the man ever returned, he would smash his car. Luckily, he never did. I didn't see that guy again after that. I'm guessing the man following me was hoping that I lived alone and possibly would have broken in. I really don't know for sure though. He must have been able to follow me at a distance without me noticing. When he first saw me though, I'm not sure. I'm just glad that I never saw him again.
This happened 2 years ago when I was working for a security company while still in college. It was Christmas Eve and I had picked up an extra couple of shifts for the holiday pay. I had never been to this site before, and the day shift guard didn't say a word about any suspicious stuff happening, besides the occasional homeless person seeking shelter. The site was a massive metal company who fills rail cars with all different metals and minerals to ship across the country. I found it odd that they only had one guard for a place that large, but the company I worked for did not have the best reputation. So I arrived for my 12-hour shift, and the first couple of hours nothing was happening. I was watching a show on YouTube, and every hour on the hour it would take me about 30 minutes to walk the entire property, making sure that the place was empty and nothing bad was happening. Well, at the 1 a.m. walk around, I came across a light in the storage closet that had not been on the other 7 times I had passed by that night. I know for sure it wasn't because I had looked inside the closet earlier being nosy. The closet was about 10 feet by 10 feet and only had shelves with different samples of metal in each container. I walked inside and examined the light switch. It was not a motion activated one, nor was it a timer. This light switch was a stubby fat switch that was rather hard to flip compared to the normal switches, so this could not have been an accidental switch flip on my part. The very second that I flipped the lights off in this closet, my heart sank to my ankles because from across the hall in the laboratory, the AM/FM radio turns on. Now, I remember that I had been through this exact hallway 7 times earlier that night, and not once did I hear the radio on, not even when I was 5 steps across the hall from the lab in this little closet. I walked through the lab and turned the radio off, peeking out the door to see if a worker had come in without me knowing. Not a single car in the parking lot other than mine. I walked out of the lab with my big spotlight and made my way into the warehouse. No sooner than when the swinging doors had shut, I heard people talking. Only 2 voices and hardly audible above whisper, but it was clear as day that a full conversation was happening. My blood turned to ice because now I had no reason to believe that I was alone. I shouted out, "This is security, you cannot be in here, whoever you are, come out." I heard one of the voices whisper a harsh and loud "shh," almost like it was telling the other to be quiet. After several more unsuccessful attempts to order whoever it was to come out, I began searching. I looked high and low for over an hour and a half in any nook and cranny a person could fit in and found nothing. No signs of forced entry or exit, nothing indicating anyone else was there. After my long search, I went back to my desk to eat and continued watching my show while I reported what I saw and heard. I went on 2 more rounds before the final event of the night happened. Our company has lieutenants that patrol around the sites, making sure everything is okay and making sure that we aren't asleep. The time is unannounced, and they show up whenever, randomly. So at about 4:30 a.m., when I heard the heavy locked metal door open at the end of the hallway, I heard clear and distinct boots stepping towards me, and I yelled out, "Good morning, Lieutenant." 30 seconds went by, and I no longer heard walking or any response to my greeting. I shot out of my chair, running down the hallway looking for whoever that was. I once again checked the parking lot, and my vehicle was once again the only one in the lot. I once more checked the entire place, taking me 2 hours, but once again found nothing. When the first employee showed up, I told them about my night, and they told me no one had ever had any weird experiences there. So it was just a weird night, with my imagination? Or were there some people messing around who were very elusive, and I never managed to catch them or see them? I guess I will never know. A couple of years ago, I went Christmas shopping at a mall near where I live. The mall is pretty large and was decorated for the Christmas season. I went there after work and spent quite a bit of time shopping there. At one point though, when I was in the mall, I saw a peculiar sight. There was a man dressed as Santa Claus and he looked kind of like him. He had a beard that was obviously fake though, except this man looked disheveled. He was wearing red like Santa, but his clothes were baggy and not fitting right. Also, they were dirty, and the guy looked like if Santa had just finished a WWE match or something. He walked in the mall, and I was wondering if he was the mall Santa having a bad day, or maybe he was a guy trying to be funny dressing as Santa but purposely bad. I shrugged it off and continued shopping. Eventually, though, I did see the real mall Santa, who was at one spot taking pictures with kids. It was definitely not the same guy. So I shopped for a few more hours and then left that night. I was one of the last people in the mall, I think, because I stayed until just before it closed, and there weren't nearly as many people around. I left the mall and walked out to my car and put my things inside. When I got into my driver's seat and closed the door, I almost instantly saw the disheveled Santa again. I was not sure where he had come from. He was now walking through the parking lot. I thought that he was going to walk past my car, and so I waited to leave until he was out of the way. He did walk past, but then he turned and headed for my driver's door. Then he lunged out and tried opening the door. I literally hit lock with like a split second to spare. He viciously tried opening my door and then started maniacally banging on the window. He then moved to the back driver's side door and tried opening that. He was screaming like a madman as he continued to try to get in. I was pretty much in shock at what I was witnessing. Santa is not supposed to attack people. I quickly put my car into reverse and backed up. He continued to come after me. He went in front of my car, so I had to keep reversing for a long ways. Then I finally had some space and was able to turn away and leave. I drove out of there, away from the disheveled Santa, and called the cops on him. I must have sounded crazy reporting a man dressed as Santa trying to break into people's cars at the mall, but at least he would be easy for the police to spot. I drove home and am not sure what happened, if he was found or what. I searched on the internet and looked on the news for a report about it or something, but couldn't find anything. That made for a very memorable Christmas shopping experience, though. This happened many years ago when I was a little boy. It was Christmas time, and my family and I lived on the first floor of a large apartment complex. I remember one day on a Saturday, my mom told me that Santa was at our apartment. We went to the event room that our apartment had, and they were doing a Meet Santa type of thing. There wasn't a whole lot of people there, but those who lived nearby and had kids would bring them to see Santa. We went there and got in line, and then my sister and I met Santa. I remember when it was my turn, he asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I told him I wanted the new PlayStation. He asked me if I live here, and I told him yes, I lived right down the hall. He then told me he would see what he could do about getting me that PlayStation and gave me a candy cane. We then went back home. I think we made some holiday cookies or something. I don't quite remember that well, but where the story really gets interesting is later that night. I was in my bed and not really that sleepy, so I was just laying there playing on my Game Boy. I was in the middle of a level in my game when I heard a noise come from my window, which was literally right next to my bed. I looked up through the blinds, which were open so that you could see through them. I saw Santa standing right outside my window, and it really shocked me. He motioned for me to open the window, and I did. He then smiled at me and asked if I remembered him. I told him yes, and he handed me another candy cane. He told me he wanted to show me his sleigh. I knew something felt off about this situation. I didn't really think Santa was supposed to show up at my window like this, because it wasn't Christmas Eve yet, it was like a week before. But he was Santa after all, so I told him I'd like to see it. He told me to come out the window, and so I opened it wider. As I was about to climb out the window, the door to my room opened. It was my mother, and when she saw what was going on, she ran to me and grabbed me. When she did, Santa turned and ran away into the night. She asked me what was going on, and when I explained it to her, she told me that the man at my window was not really Santa, but just an imposter pretending to be him. She then called the police, but by the time they got there, the man was long gone. I was young, but when I spoke to my mom about the incident in recent years, she told me based on the information of the man dressed as Santa who was at the apartment that day, they were able to locate the man and he was caught.
I'm so glad that my mom came into my room when she did. This story happened almost a decade ago now, when I was a senior in high school. It's also important to note that it happened in the middle of December in the midst of a snowstorm. I'm from the Midwest, and the winters here get cold at night, to the point if you get stuck outside you will die in the cold. That plus the snowfall makes everything dead silent, so you can hear anything and everything inside the house and immediately outside of it. Well, my best friend and I were hanging out in the family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. It was just us home because my mother went straight from work to a bar to grab a few drinks and dinner with coworkers. My friend and I were a bit rebellious and decided to hit my mom's liquor cabinet while we played video games. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately panicked and started looking for places to hide the bottle so my mom didn't see it. We heard a few heavy stomps upstairs and then heard my mother's voice call out, "Is anyone home?" I yelled back up the stairs yes, and I was just hanging out in the basement. I heard a few more steps from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yelled out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I replied back yes 1 second, while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the liquor bottle. Then there was silence for about 20 seconds, and my mom yelled down again, asking if anyone was down in the basement with me in a more serious, concerned tone. I didn't notice right away because I was distracted by trying to hide the liquor bottle, but this time when she yelled down the stairs, it sounded a little off from my mom's voice. The voice sounded similar to my mom's voice, but it definitely wasn't her. That was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. And second, my mom never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house for all family and friends. Weirded out by the voice, I replied back that I was downstairs with some friends, even though it was really just one friend. I crept over to the bottom of the stairs and looked up towards the kitchen area, which was connected to the rest of the house. It was still pitch black upstairs, and I felt that my mom would have already turned some lights on. My mom didn't say anything else to me, but I could hear footsteps walking around the rooms up above me. I pulled out my phone and called my mom, who picked up immediately. I asked her if she was home, and she replied that she was still at the bar with her friends. I filled her in on the whole story of what I heard upstairs, and she rushed home. My friend was very confused, and I told my friend that my mom was not home and I didn't know who was upstairs right now. He was very confused, saying that he just heard me talking to her upstairs though. I grabbed my truck keys while my friend and I stood near the back door that opened up to the yard, ready to bolt through the snowstorm to my truck if needed. We waited for my mom to get home, and the whole time we could hear somebody upstairs walking around. By the time my mom got home and came down to check on us, whoever or whatever was upstairs was gone now. The strangest part though is that we never heard footsteps leaving or one of the doors to the house opening and closing. We even searched every part of the house cautiously where someone could be hiding, but there was nobody inside. To this day, I'm still not sure what happened that night. Either an intruder with a voice similar to my mom's was upstairs waiting to pounce if I came up, and they exited the house silently somehow, or something stranger was going on that snowy night. I was about 9 when this happened, and even now, decades later, I still think about it more often than I'd like to admit. It was the first Christmas after I found out Santa wasn't real. The year before, I had gotten up to get a glass of water and caught my dad coming through the back door with unwrapped presents in his arms. He didn't see me, and I never told him, but I just went back upstairs forgetting about the water. Maybe I didn't want to ruin it for him, or maybe I just wanted to pretend things were the same. So next Christmas came around, and this time I planned to be sneaky. I wasn't interested in pretending anymore. I just wanted to get a look at my gifts early. All I wanted was a PS2. I'd asked for almost nothing else, and I'd had good grades and no real problems at school. Nothing that should have gotten me the maybe next Christmas response. I was sure that it would be waiting under the tree. Sometime after midnight on Christmas Eve, I woke up naturally. The house was dark and quiet. I eased my door open and looked down the length of the hallway. No movement and no voices from downstairs, so I was pretty sure that my parents were in bed. I tiptoed down the hallway, making sure to avoid the squeaky spot near my sister's door. From where I was standing, I could see the glow from the Christmas lights on the tree.
It should have been comforting, but something felt strange right away. The lights were dimmer than usual, like something was blocking them. I got low and crawled the last few feet to the living room. I thought that maybe my dad was still putting up stuff under the tree for my siblings, and I didn't want him to know that I was there. While I reached the corner crawling head first, I stopped and peeked around. Something huge was standing in front of the Christmas tree, and it wasn't my dad. This person was much taller and wider than my dad. The person was wearing a long black coat. It hung straight down, almost touching the floor. It looked wet, like it had been out in the rain. Something was dripping from the bottom of it, slow and steady, onto the carpet. My first instinct was to back up. Slowly, carefully, and quietly, I tried to begin backing up, still crawling. I told myself I'd gotten it wrong, that I was half asleep and maybe my eyes were adjusting. But before I could pull fully out of sight, the figure moved. Not much, but just slightly turned around, looking over its shoulder right towards where I was, and it moved enough to let me know that it knew I was there. I didn't see a face. I only saw the side of its head and the shape of its jaw. Based on the shape of the figure of the jaw, I'm guessing that it was a man. Then he spoke to me in a voice I didn't recognize at all. He said calmly and slowly, "Only the dead can come back." I didn't understand what that sentence meant in the moment, and I still don't. But the way he said it made every part of me get cold. I gave up on trying to be quiet. I stood up and ran straight for my bedroom, shut the door, and climbed into bed. I really should have run to my parents' room, but I guess my 9-year-old self just wanted to forget what I had seen and hide under my covers. I sat there listening, but the house was still quiet, and eventually I fell asleep. Christmas morning was awful. I opened presents, smiled and thanked my parents, and got the PS2 that I had wanted so badly. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something else had been in the house that night. Someone that wasn't supposed to be there. I still dream about it sometimes, and I see the long coat, the dripping onto the carpet, and I hear the voice saying that same single line.
For some background on the story, I'm a female, and I live alone in a house. I live about 5 minutes away from my parents' house, and I go there for most holidays. A few years ago, during Christmas, I had plans to go to my parents as usual. In the meantime, I had decorated my entire house with Christmas decorations pretty much right after Thanksgiving. I love getting into the holiday spirit, and I got a tree, nutcrackers, and all kinds of other things. I was playing Christmas music in my house almost every day. The weekend before Christmas, I hosted a Christmas party at my house with my friend group. We did a little gift exchange and things like that. Fast forward to Christmas Eve, several days later. I woke up in the morning at 8 a.m. This is later than I usually have to get up because I had off of work. I felt so refreshed and I got out of bed and made some coffee. As I was doing so, I looked out and noticed a single gift under my Christmas tree. It was a green box that was sort of large and it looked poorly wrapped. The present had a bow on it as well. I was confused. I was sure I hadn't seen it before. I thought for a moment maybe it was left over from the Christmas party I had, but I was sure that I would have seen it. The gift was right under the tree and in very plain sight. I walked over to it and examined it. My name was written on it with a smile face drawn next to my name. I wondered how on earth it got there, and I decided to open it. When I did, it was a cardboard box. I opened that, which contained a handwritten note, and then a few random flowers and a winter hat. The hat was one that I already had though. I was really confused and I read the note. It said, "Merry Christmas. I got flowers just for you, even though you didn't invite me to your party last week. It looked like fun. By the way, here's your hat back. You left it outside." I was so confused after reading this, and a creeped out feeling came over me. Was this some kind of a joke or something? I took a picture of it and put it in the group chat that I had with my friends. They were really quick to all deny it, which I believed. It didn't seem like something any of them would do. But more importantly, how did this get inside of my house? I walked back over to the kitchen. When I did, I suddenly thought that I heard a noise coming from inside my house. I froze in place. I didn't know if I was being paranoid or if I actually had heard something. Then I heard it again. I could tell exactly where that noise was coming from. It was from the closet down in my hallway. I walked quickly but calmly to the front door, grabbed my keys, then walked outside. Then I got into my car and left. I drove to my parents' house and told them everything. We called the police, who then went to my house. A short time later, I was told they had found a man hiding inside. It was a huge relief to hear that he had been caught. It turns out some guy had started stalking me and I didn't even know it. He apparently broke in through the window that was behind my Christmas tree, so I hadn't noticed that it was broken. After breaking into my house, he placed his gift and then hid in my hallway closet. I'm so lucky that I left when I did, because I don't know what that man's intentions were.
Two years ago, I went Christmas shopping at the mall with my wife. We went to this really big mall that has basically every store inside of it. We had a lot of shopping to do to buy presents for everybody in our families, including each other. After getting to the mall, we did lots of shopping for people in the family. It took hours to find all the stuff. We had our hands full with bags, so we went out to the car in the parking garage. Then we went back inside the mall after unloading. By now, it was nighttime and we were almost done shopping, but my wife and I decided to momentarily split up to try to find some gifts for each other. With how large this mall was, I figured this would be pretty easy to do. So I went to a couple of stores and I found something for her that she would really like, but I was trying to find something else as well. During this time, I remember that I was walking in the mall and randomly this woman came up to me. She literally came up from behind me and tapped me on the shoulder. I did not know who she was. The woman then told me that my wife was looking for me and her phone was dead. She went on to say that my wife was downstairs outside by the north exit and wanted to meet me there. It just seemed really weird to me. I guess my wife must have asked this woman to tell me that. The woman then walked away before I could really say anything. I didn't know why my wife would be there though. I started to go to the escalator to go downstairs, trying to make sense of this whole situation. When I was on my way down though, I decided to try calling my wife. When I did, she didn't answer her phone. This made me start to believe the woman, so I started walking for the north exit. This exit was by far the quietest one and was rarely used anymore. That's because there was no parking lot there, it was just a sidewalk. Then there was a grass area with some trees and another building of a restaurant that was connected to the mall. There had used to be a parking lot there, but when the restaurant was built, it took the place of it. I walked over to the doors and then opened them. I looked outside and I did not see my wife. It was really dark out there now with little to no lighting, just a dim street light a ways down and then light coming from the restaurant. I stepped outside fully and looked around. I still didn't see anything. But just at that point, I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket. I took it out to see that my wife was calling me. I answered and asked her where she was. She told me that she was in the mall by the food court kind of. At that point, I quickly walked right back inside of the mall myself. My wife went on to say that she hadn't noticed that I called her, so she was calling me back. I told her about the strange woman. We were both pretty much done shopping for the most part, so we met up by the food court and then went to the car and went home. I'm still really confused about the whole thing. Was I being set up to get robbed or something? I really don't know. I don't know who the woman was or how she knew my wife and I. I'm really glad that my wife called me when she did though, or I don't know what would have happened.
I have worked in retail for about 4 years now. The strangest and creepiest thing that I ever witnessed was last year. I was working at a clothing store and usually worked around the men's department. It was around the holidays, and during that time we were very busy and stayed open for 24 hours just for the month. I ended up working quite a few late night shifts, which I didn't think I was going to like, but surprisingly they weren't that bad. Anyways, one night it was really late, probably 1 or 2 in the morning, and the store was dead. It was generally very quiet late at night except on weekends. At this time, there was literally no customers in the store and just a few of us working. I was folding clothes and straightening up near the men's sweaters when I barely heard the automatic doors open from the front of the store. I kept working, and a short while later I saw a tall man wearing a suit and tie walk into the men's section. I didn't pay much attention to how he looked. I just noticed he had short brown hair, and for one reason or another, I felt uncomfortable when he walked closer towards me. I have no explanation for why, because I usually enjoy talking to customers and helping them, but something just seemed off for some reason. I chalked it up to it being so late at night and one of my first times on the late night shift, so everything seemed a little bit different. The man walked around and browsed the clothing for a little while,
but didn't really seem to be looking at any one thing in particular. I continued my work, and then saw the man walk into the fitting rooms, which were around the corner. That confused me a little bit, because it didn't look like he had any clothes in his hands that he was going to try on. About 10 minutes passed by, and I kept working. The whole time I was facing the wall where the fitting rooms were, just as I had been since before the man arrived. Pretty soon, 10 minutes turned into 20, and I became suspicious when the man never came out. I decided to go over and just look and see if he was all right. I wasn't going to actually go in his room, but I was planning just to look around and knock on the door. I walked down the hall where the 4 men's fitting rooms were. When I got into the hallway and looked around, I saw that every room door was wide open, and when I walked farther, I saw nobody was inside any of them. I was especially shocked because I know I would have seen if the man left, and there was no exit to the building down there. I looked around once more, and then went out to the front of the store and asked a coworker if she had seen the man leave at all. She said she hadn't seen any man in a suit at all. That really gave me the creeps, but the creepiest part was when we looked over the security footage and the man that I had seen didn't appear on it at all.
This story took place just last year. It was in December, just a few weeks before Christmas. I live in a large neighborhood in a house with my wife and 2 young children. One evening, my wife met up with one of her best friends. Her best friend's kids are around the same ages as ours, and they all went to spend time together. My wife told me this while I was at work and asked me to set up the Christmas lights when I got home. I told her that I would do it, and I wanted to surprise the kids with them when they got home. We had gotten a little bit of snow already, but the weather wasn't too cold, so it was a good night to do it. We had several lawn decorations, but the hardest part was hanging up the lights from the roof. I would have to take out the ladder and climb up onto the roof for that. So that day, when I got home from work, almost instantly, I went to the garage and got everything that I needed. It was dark out by then, and I first set up some of the things in our front yard. Then I got the ladder and went on top of the roof. The lights went all the way around our house, on both sides, in the front and back of it. When I got around towards the back side of the house and I was still on top of the roof, I heard a noise coming from below. I didn't know what it was at first, but it sounded like somebody was back there. Even though it was dark out, I had a pretty good view of my surroundings. When I looked, I finally saw that there was a man standing sort of near our house, behind it. I had never seen him before, and he was not a neighbor that I was aware of. I didn't know what this guy was doing in my backyard. I saw him walk closer to me. I called out, asking who he was and what he was doing, but he didn't answer. Instead, he started running towards my ladder. It was a ways down, probably about 20 feet. There was no way that I was going to get there before him. The guy then took my ladder and knocked it down. Now I had no way of getting off of the roof. Then he walked around to the back door, which I had left unlocked. He then entered our house. I was angry, but tried to remain calm. Luckily, I did have my cell phone on me. I dialed 911 and told them about what had happened. Then I just had to wait for them to arrive and hope that the man did not destroy my house or steal anything. I yelled down to him that I called the police, hoping that it would scare him off. I really didn't hear anything though. I wasn't sure where the guy was or what he was doing. Then, probably 2 or 3 minutes later, the guy suddenly left. He came running out of my house at about full speed. He ran through the backyard and then hopped the fence which connected my yard with my neighbor's. After leaping it, he kept running and very quickly was completely out of my sight. I was glad to see him gone and didn't notice him holding anything as he ran. He very well could have stolen something small and put it in his pocket or still damaged something, but overall this was a relief. Just a few minutes after that, the police showed up. They were able to get my ladder and help me get down from the roof. Then they searched my house and property and said that they would look around in the nearby area for the man. I didn't have a great description of him, but I told them what I could. The crazy part is after searching the house, nothing was messed up and nothing was stolen either. That really surprised me. I still don't know why he entered my house or was even in my yard, and after the police left, I finished putting my lights up, but was very careful. The guy never came back. I finished on time before my wife and kids returned home. After that, nothing like that has happened since. We still live there, and I recently put out all the decorations again. This year, things went much smoother. This happened after work this past Christmas Eve. I work a later second shift from 5 p.m. until around 1 a.m. I should also mention that while the warehouse is in a nicer area, a couple blocks down it gets sketchy at night. We got done around 2 a.m., and me and one friend were the first out to the parking lot, and we were standing there talking for a while warming up our cars. We were talking for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and during that time I saw this small sedan drive slowly by, but I didn't think much of it, because it was a little icy out and I figured they were just being cautious. But then I saw it slowly coming back down the road towards us, and it pulled in and parked in the parking lot across from us. This was strange because it's a welding shop parking lot, and no one was ever there past 10 p.m. besides police doing speed traps. At that point, I pointed it out to my friend, and he said that he noticed as well and thought that it was weird. Then this large dude got out of the car and walked across the street over to me and my friend, while the car he got out of drove off. He asked my friend for a smoke, and as he did that, I walked over to my car and started scraping it off, so he would hopefully just not talk to me. But as soon as I stepped back out of my car with my wallet in hand so that I could use one of my cards to scrape the windows, he called over to me. I didn't want to be rude, even though something felt off about the situation, but I wasn't too worried about my safety because there were cameras watching me. Also, the rest of the workers would be out within 10 minutes, so I would be fine. He was trying to make small talk with me, asking about what we do there at work, and how it sucks that we had to work on Christmas Eve. Just random stuff, but I got the feeling that he was sizing me up. So even though I have extreme social anxiety and can barely make eye contact with people I know, I made direct eye contact with him the whole time. I remembered my grandpa always telling me that if I was in a sketchy situation with someone, to stand tall, put my chest out a bit, and make direct eye contact the entire time. Essentially, do whatever you can to make it look like you are not scared or nervous, so that you look like you're more trouble than you're worth. I saw him keep looking down towards my wallet, so I took a small step back, and I could make sure that I was in the view of the cameras. Then he said, "So hey man, do you think you could give me a ride to my house? It's just right down the road, and I ran out of gas at the store, and I need to get back to my house to get money." The grocery store he said his car ran out of gas at was about a mile down the road to the east, but the dude came from the west. Also, if he needed a ride to his house in the west, why wouldn't he have gotten one from the person who dropped him off across the street in the parking lot in the first place? I then remembered reading online somewhere that around the holidays, people will do whatever they can to try to get someone to give them a ride. Then they will force them to take them back to their house and rob them. At this point, I figured the dude was trying to rob me, so I just walked backwards towards my car since I had a big utility knife under the seat. I told him I was good and to please get off our company property. He said, "Come on man, it's Christmas Eve," while looking visibly angry, and I said, "That sucks dude, get off the property." I got into my car, and he could see me reaching under the seat, so he then turned around and walked away and disappeared in the alley a block away. I then went over to my friend's car to tell him what happened, and he said that the dude was trying to get him to give him money for cigarettes, and he tried to get him to give him a ride to the ATM. 2 days later, a picture of the same guy was on the local police department's Facebook page asking for information on him, because he was wanted in relation to a string of armed robberies that happened during Christmas week.
This happened on Christmas Eve, just last year. I'm 22 and recently graduated from college. Each year on Christmas Eve, my family goes to my uncle's house for a get-together. Then on Christmas, everybody comes to our house. Last year, unfortunately for me, I had to work on Christmas Eve. I had a job at a department store in a nearby city to where we live. It was a part-time job that I worked mostly in the summer or whenever I was back home from school. I would be getting paid extra, but would have to miss the family gathering at my uncle's. We closed slightly early at about 8 p.m. instead of the usual 10 p.m. My uncle's place was almost an hour away though, so even if I wanted to drive there right after work, it would be kind of late, and I decided not to. Instead, I went back to my parents' house where I lived and was all by myself. I got back home after work at about 8:30. I remember not long after I returned home, I texted with my parents, and they were probably going to be staying at my uncle's until almost midnight. I made some food and then relaxed and went into the living room and put on a movie. Everything was going well until about 11 o'clock at night. Out of nowhere, there were some loud bangs on the front door. It was very startling. I sat up and didn't even want to look to see who was there. The noises continued. It was like whoever was there was pounding as hard as they possibly could on the front door. After probably 10 seconds, I walked over to a window that overlooked the front door. I was upstairs and on the second floor, and when I got to the window, very carefully looked outside. I peeled back the window cover ever so slightly. When I did, I saw 3 large-looking men wearing dark-colored jackets and dark hats. I couldn't see any of their faces. They were standing around the door, and one of them was knocking on it. The bad feeling that I had became much worse. I had no idea what to do. I ran out of the room and called my parents. I told them about the situation, and my parents did not know who the men could possibly be. They said to call the police if the men didn't leave, and they told me that they would leave to come home now. Still, it would probably be 45 minutes before they got back. The knocking at the door finally stopped. I looked out the window and saw all of the men now running around to the back. This was not good. I moved towards the back of the house to try to see where the men were going. Within a minute, I heard the doorknobs to one of the back doors rattling. They were trying to get inside now. That was followed by a loud banging at the other back door that we had. I dialed 911 and tried to stay calm, even though I was completely freaking out. The men stayed near the back of the house. Then things went quiet for probably 2 or 3 minutes. I thought that maybe the men had left, but was too scared to look out of a window and see. But the silence was broken by more loud bangs, this time coming from a window. This was really bad, because I didn't think the window would hold up, and they would eventually break it. Probably 30 seconds after this, I heard the sound of a car pulling into our driveway. It had to be the police. The noises from the window suddenly stopped. I decided to look out the back window now. When I did, I saw all 3 men sprinting through our backyard. They were running to the back end of it, where we had a few trees, and then there was a quiet road. Very quickly, they went out of sight, and when I looked to the front and saw the police were there, I rushed out and told them about the men and that they were running away. Unfortunately, all of the men were pretty fast, and were long gone by the time the police started looking for them. I'm not sure where they came from or where they went, but they were gone now. The police still looked around and asked me a few questions. Not long after that, my parents got home. I felt much better not being there alone anymore. After the police left, we stayed up late making sure that the guys didn't return, and luckily, they didn't. That was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had.
Christmas Eve dinner at Burger King was how I would be spending my Christmas one year. Not my first choice, but I had to work late, and being Christmas Eve, it looked like my best choice. I finished working at 9 p.m. and had some coupons for Burger King, so that made my decision for me. When I got there, I noticed it was still open, but the dining room was shut down. The only way I could get something was if I went through the drive-thru. The only problem was that I didn't have a car. I tried to walk up to the drive-thru and place the order, but the lady working the drive-thru wasn't having it. She told me that if I didn't have a vehicle, I could not use the drive-thru. I became rather aggravated and began saying things that I'm not proud of. At that moment, an older woman wearing shining armor appeared on the scene and offered for me to jump into her car and order my food. At first, I turned her down, not wanting to be a bother, but after some convincing, I decided to accept her help. After ordering my food, it took so long for it to come out, I missed my bus and got upset. The nice woman offered me a ride home, and I felt bad to bother her even more, so I declined. She was persistent, but at the same time nice, and convinced me to accept her offer. I was a 250-pound, 30-year-old man, so I really didn't feel that threatened by a 50-something-year-old woman. If the circumstances were different, I would not have taken the ride. After I told her where I lived, we proceeded home. About 5 minutes from my house, she made the wrong turn. I explained that I lived the other way and we needed to turn around and she could let me out there so I could walk the rest of the way. It was then that the woman's demeanor changed. She told me that she could not let me spend Christmas Eve alone and that she was taking me to her house. I told her that I needed to get home immediately to let my dog out and that I would be fine. The woman then tried to entice me with cocaine and liquor at her place, but since I was in recovery, I told her that I wasn't interested. She refused to turn around or let me out and started to drive strangely, not stopping at stop signs. My mind was racing and I began to sweat. I knew that I could physically overpower this woman, but what awaited me at her house? I also felt bad about hurting her after all her kindness, but I had to get away before her house and I didn't know where that was, so I didn't know how much time I had. Then luckily the car in front of us stopped at a stop sign, and across from it another was stopped also. She had to slow down to almost stop at this point, and that was where I made my break. I jumped out of the car, leaving my food in the back seat, and took off running. As I was running away, she stopped and got out of her car and began to try to talk me into getting back in the car with her. That just wasn't an option. I don't know what her motives were or who she was, but I knew I wasn't willing to risk my life over it. I ran all the way home, and I'm sure I wasn't followed. What would have happened to me if it was 2 years earlier and I was still doing drugs and drinking? Her offer of cocaine and booze would have probably worked, and whatever kidnapping or sketchy thing that I think she had planned would have probably worked. Being a man, the thought of the vulnerability that most women face daily was so foreign to me, and I now understand the fear that most women face. I really felt that this nice woman had a nefarious purpose, and I just so happened to be the perfect victim of opportunity. I never went to the cops because I felt they might not believe me or they might look down at me for being scared. It was Christmas Eve 2020. I was out making money driving for Lyft for a few hours before heading to my mom's place with my new baby and wife. Nothing special going on for the night, just the usual. I got a ride request, and it was a pickup from this lower-income apartment complex. No big deal. I arrived and found my passenger who had all his belongings with him, several boxes of stuff. Now, my car was not super large, so we got all his stuff loaded up just barely, and then we were on our way. During the ride, he was crying and said that his girlfriend was cheating on him, and he had walked in on them earlier that night. He couldn't stay there because it was her name on the lease. Therefore, I was driving him to a hotel. In my city, we have a street that's known for having vices. Hookers, drugs, gangs, weapons, and shady motels, all of it. We got to the motel, and my passenger asked me to wait for him to check in and get his key. The motel was on that street that I mentioned before. Homeless people were everywhere, and I knew the reputation of the area, so I was on edge. My passenger came back with his key, and the whole motel is ground level, so to help this guy out, I drove him to his door. As I mentioned before, he had a lot of stuff, so I started to help him unload his stuff. Well, on my second trip of getting stuff, I saw a guy come out of a room just to the south of my car, followed by two ladies. They came up to the room I was parked next to, and one of the ladies pounded on the door and then opened it. That's when I saw the guy with the two girls raise a shotgun up out of a long coat and storm into the room. The two ladies followed him, slamming the door behind him. Following that, I heard a lot of yelling and shouting, and I was just waiting for shots to ring out. Out of nowhere, my passenger came up behind me and said, "I can take this man. Go ahead and take off, and have a Merry Christmas." He took out his last boxes out of my hand and walked back to his room. I knew what may have been going down in that room next door, and that I had to leave quickly. I know the guy and both ladies saw me, and I know they knew I saw the gun. I had to get out of there in case, no witnesses. I got to my car and sped away quickly. I got a block or so away and called the cops. I gave them every single detail that I saw. I got a call later that night from the police on what they had investigated. They never found the gunmen or the women, and they never answered the initial motel door I saw them come out of. The occupants of the room they went into said nothing happened and that I, the witness, was lying, but I know what I saw.